Good evening, listeners. Or maybe I should say, good midnight. You've tuned in to a signal meant for those who cannot sleep, for the restless, for the ones who lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what moves beyond the walls of their homes. Tonight, I bring you 7 tales, 7 confessions whispered from the edges of the world. A shepherd struck by lightning in the Montana hills, whose death may not have been a storm's accident. A son who welcomed home his father, only to find the man was nothing more than a memory wearing flesh. 3 wives, each buried with a secret, in a Victorian house where the floorboards keep more than dust. A narrow Tokyo alley where a girl learns that the ground beneath her feet has mouths of its own. A mother in Chicago who hears her child speak a word she cannot see shadow and discovers the enemy lives in her walls. A man trapped in a New Orleans furnace room, the house demanding he join the voices already burning inside it. And finally, an old fortune teller in Alaska, foolish enough to read for himself and find death staring back from the bowl. These are not just stories, they are warnings, maps of places you must not linger, and perhaps if you listen too closely, they are invitations. So pour another cup of coffee, or blow out the light if you dare, because what follows is not meant for comfort. It is meant for company, the kind that keeps you awake, long after the last word fades. Story 1. The Shepherd Boy. They called it Echo Valley, a lonely stretch of Montana highland where storms arrived without warning, rolling down from the mountains like black curtains unfurling across the sky. People said the thunder here remembered names, though Sarah Morgan had always dismissed that as folklore until tonight. She crouched in the drenched grass, recorder in hand, boots sinking into the sodden earth. The storm had passed an hour earlier, but the air still hummed with static. Before her lay the body of Elias Gray, 22 years old, a shepherd boy known in town for his quiet smile and endless patience with sheep. Now his face was twisted in a final expression, mouth open, eyes wide, not so much in pain, but in astonishment, as if he had seen something impossible descend from the sky. Case file, Echo Valley incident. Sarah's voice carried into the recorder, steady despite the heaviness in her chest. Victim identified as Elias Gray. Apparent cause of death, lightning strike. But even as she said it, doubt pressed against her ribs. The grass around Elias was charred in a circle, not scattered, not jagged, but perfectly round, as though drawn by an invisible compass. Lightning was never so precise. She brushed the soil with her glove and felt the brittle crackle of scorched stems. A glint caught her eye. Lying just beyond his outstretched arm was an umbrella. Its handle was metal, old-fashioned, the fabric torn and soaked through. Its ribs bent outward grotesquely, warped by a force that seemed to come from above. When Sarah picked it up, warmth pulsed faintly through her glove. Even the smell lingered, burnt fabric layered with the acrid tang of scorched iron. She lifted the recorder closer. Evidence recovered. Umbrella, metallic handle, significant burn marks, strong odor of electrical discharge. Sarah. Oh. Her partner, Officer Daniel Harker, stood farther down the slope, flashlight cutting across the dark. She approached, umbrella still in hand. The sheep were clustered against the fence, not scattered as they should have been after a storm. They pressed together, rigid, eyes rolling white in the moonlight. Daniel crouched near another scorched mark in the earth. A circle again, almost identical to the one around Elias's body. 2 strikes? He asked. Sarah shook her head. Lightning doesn't draw circles. The valley seemed to listen. Too quiet, no crickets, no owls, no whisper of nightlife reclaiming the silence. The stillness pressed against their ears like wool. Back at the body, Sarah unbuttoned Elias's collar. What she found made her stomach clench. Strapped against his chest, beneath the soaked wool shirt, was a crude copper device. A spiral ending in a sharp point, a handmade talisman, meant to act as a personal lightning rod. It gleamed under the flashlight, untouched, no scorch marks, no signs of heat. Her voice faltered into the recorder. Subject carried lightning, protection device. No damage observed. Fatal injuries localized around the head. Cause of death, inconsistent with equipment. Daniel's brow furrowed. So the lightning ignored the rod. Her eyes shifted back to the umbrella. Its warped metal ribs jutted skyward like skeletal fingers. She remembered something she had once read in the archives of the local Crow tribe. Objects pointed toward the heavens were invitations, Storms sometimes answered. They called them the tongues of thunder spirits. The sheep bleated suddenly, shrill, panicked. Their hooves scraped the soil as they pressed tighter against the fence. And in that cry, Sarah thought she heard something else. A whisper, faint as the wind. It sounded like a name, Elias. Her breath caught. The storm had passed. Stars pricked through torn clouds, yet the valley still hummed, charged with an unfinished hunger. Sarah clicked off the recorder. Some part of her knew she had just stepped into a story older than her badge, older than fences or towns, older even than the boy at her feet. And that story was not finished with Elias Gray. The next morning, clouds lingered over Echo Valley like a bruise that refused to fade. Sarah sat at the small desk in her rented cabin, the umbrella resting across the wood like an artifact no one should have unearthed. She had bagged it properly the night before, but even sealed in plastic it seemed to pulse with its own weather dampness clinging to the handle, the faint metallic odor refusing to dissipate. She clicked on her laptop, intending to file her preliminary report. Instead, her fingers hovered above the keys. The official narrative lightning strike. Accidental death felt hollow. Too neat. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Daniel stood there holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. His eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but his grin tried to lighten the weight between them. "You look like you haven't slept." "I didn't." She took the cup. "Thanks." He leaned against the doorframe. "I called the coroner. They'll run the usual tests, but they're already saying electrocution. Case closed." Except it doesn't make sense," Sarah said. The rod on his chest was intact. No burns, no arcing, nothing. It's like the strike bypassed it. Daniel's shrug was slow, uneasy. "Lightning's unpredictable." Sarah set the cup down and gestured to the umbrella. "But it isn't surgical. That circle, those circles, we both saw them." He followed her gaze. "You think the umbrella was the target?" "I think." She hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. "I think he wasn't killed by chance. Something chose him." Silence thickened. Daniel's expression hardened, skeptical yet not dismissive. He'd been in Echo Valley long enough to know the locals whispered things that never made it into official reports. Finally, he said, "If you want folklore, you need Old Man Red Elk." The elder lived in a weather-beaten trailer perched above the valley. When Sarah and Daniel arrived that afternoon, the wind-rattled dream catchers strung along the porch. Feathers and beads spun like compasses gone mad. Red Elk was Crow, his hair long and silver, his posture bent but his eyes sharp as flint. He watched Sarah approach without surprise, as if he had expected her. "You brought the storm with you," he said in a gravelly voice. Sarah blinked. "We're investigating Elias Gray's death." "I know who died," Red Elk replied. He motioned them inside. The trailer smelled of sage smoke and old wood. Paintings of lightning hung on the walls, some jagged and wild, others stylized as serpents twisting from cloud to earth. Sarah unzipped her evidence bag and placed the umbrella carefully on the table. "Do you recognize this?" Red Elk did not touch it. He only stared, his lips tightening. "That is not an umbrella. That is a tongue." "Oh, a tongue?" Daniel repeated. "The tongue of thunder spirits. Anything that points to the sky can become one. Poles, spears, umbrellas. The storm sees it, and the storm hungers." Sarah felt a chill rise beneath her skin. "You're saying Elias invited the strike?" Red Elk's gaze cut to her, unblinking. "No one invites them. They choose." The spirits lick the ground, tasting names. Sometimes the tongue is only a tool. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, sir, we're looking for practical answers. Why would his lightning rod fail? Why the circles?" Red Elk's laugh was dry, humorless. "Because the storm was not aiming at the rod. It was aiming at him." Sarah's throat tightened. She thought of Elias's expression, the shock, the awe, as if he'd seen his executioner. Red Elk leaned closer, voice low. "Long ago, our people warned. When thunder walks the valley, you do not carry anything that points upward. You keep your head bowed, your hands empty. The storm must pass without a tongue to seize. But your shepherd boy he carried too. The umbrella, the device on his chest." Sarah pressed her palms to her knees, grounding herself. "Do you believe someone gave it to him, knowing what would happen?" The elder did not answer. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small object, a stone carved with spiral lines, almost identical to the copper talisman on Elias's chest. "This was found years ago," he said. "Another young man died. Same circle burned into the ground. Same silence afterward. You think this is new?" The valley remembers. Sarah glanced at Daniel, but his face had gone pale. That night, alone in her cabin, Sarah replayed the elder's words in her mind. The storm sees it, and the storm hungers. The umbrella lay sealed in its bag on the table, but she swore she heard faint crackling, as though static crawled across the plastic. She forced herself to open her laptop and type, pushing logic against the tide of superstition. Yet logic faltered when her screen flickered. A brief pulse, like distant lightning, though the sky outside was clear. And in the faint reflection on the dark glass, she thought she saw a circle of scorched grass spreading outward, endless, swallowing the cabin whole. Sarah snapped the laptop shut, breath ragged. The silence of the valley pressed in, thick and waiting. Somewhere, she imagined thunder rolling, not overhead, but inside the earth itself. The storm was not finished. Sarah drove into town the following morning, with the umbrella sealed in its evidence bag, riding like a passenger in the back seat. She kept glancing at it in the rearview mirror, half expecting the plastic to twitch. Each time her eyes returned to the road, she found herself gripping the wheel tighter, as if she were carrying something alive. The town of Bridger's Rest was little more than a main street. A diner, a post office, a feed store, the sort of place where gossip traveled faster than weather. As Sarah parked near the cafe, she noticed how the locals glanced at her vehicle, their eyes slipping past the badge on the dashboard to settle on the outline of the umbrella behind the glass. They looked away quickly, muttering. Inside the cafe, the air was thick with coffee and frying bacon. Sarah slid into a booth, her notebook ready. She'd already asked herself the same question a dozen times since Red Elk's warning. Where had Elias gotten the umbrella? The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a practiced smile, poured her coffee without being asked. Sarah flashed her badge. "Morning. I'm investigating Elias Gray's death. Did you know him?" The woman hesitated. Her smile faltered. Everyone knew Elias, kept to himself, but he was kind, looked after his flock, looked after his mother, never caused trouble. "And did he ever come in here?" "Sometimes. Ordered pie, mostly. Always sat by the window." She lowered her voice. "He came in 2 weeks ago with something strange. Said he'd bought it from the trading post up by the highway. Showed it off like a prize." "What was it?" The waitress's eyes flicked toward Sarah's bag, where the umbrella rested at her side. Her voice dropped even further. "That." The trading post sat on the outskirts of town, half souvenir shop, half pawn store, its shelves cluttered with everything from arrowheads to rusted farm tools. The bell above the door jangled as Sarah stepped inside. Behind the counter, a gaunt man in a denim jacket looked up. His eyes narrowed when he saw the badge. "Sheriff's office? Investigation," Sarah corrected. "I need to ask about a sale you made. An umbrella metal handle, old-fashioned." The man's mouth twitched. He leaned back on his stool. "Lot of junk passes through here." Sarah set the evidence bag on the counter. The umbrella's bent ribs looked skeletal under the fluorescent lights. The man's face drained of color. "You still got that thing? So you remember it." He rubbed his jaw, restless. "Came in from an estate sale down in Billings. Box of antiques, lamps, books, odds and ends. Umbrella was at the bottom. Nobody wanted it. The boy Elias, he stopped in, saw it, said it'd be useful out in the pastures. Paid $5. Did you tell him anything about it?" "Nothing to tell. Just an umbrella." His eyes flicked nervously to the door, then back to Sarah. But when he walked out with it, the air felt wrong, like a storm was waiting. "I even shut early that day." Sarah scribbled notes, though her pulse had quickened. "You didn't think to mention that when you heard he'd been struck?" The man bristled. "Lady, folks around here don't talk about those things. We've seen enough storms swallow enough men. Best to let the ground keep what it takes." That night, Sarah returned to her cabin. The valley lay quiet beneath a heavy sky, though no storms were forecast. She tried to write her report, but her hands trembled. The umbrella seemed to radiate presence from across the room. She rose and paced to the window. Below, the dark pasture stretched toward the tree line, the same land Elias had walked 100 times. She thought she saw movement among the grass, not the bleating of sheep, but something shifting in a slow circle. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside. The night air was sharp with cold. The beam of light swept across the field, revealing nothing but dew-soaked grass. Yet when she turned, she realized she was standing in a ring, a perfect black circle burned into the ground where none had been before. Her breath fogged in the air. The earth under her boots was warm. The flashlight flickered, buzzed, then died. In the sudden dark, she heard it. Not thunder, not wind, but a voice carried low across the valley. Sarah. She spun, searching the horizon. The sound came again, softer, like an echo inside her skull. Sarah. Her heart hammered. She stumbled back toward the cabin, forcing the door shut behind her. Her hands shook as she locked it, but when she turned, the umbrella was no longer where she had left it. The evidence bag lay empty on the floor. Across the room, leaning against the window frame as though someone had placed it there deliberately, the umbrella pointed upward. Its ribs stretched toward the night sky, waiting. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in a chair until dawn, every nerve taut, the umbrella casting long shadows in the gray light. When the phone rang, she nearly jumped out of her skin. It was Daniel. His voice was tight. "Sarah, you need to come. Another body, same as Elias, North Pasture." Her stomach sank. She glanced at the umbrella, still propped against the window like an accusation. The storm had chosen again. The North Pasture lay shrouded in a haze of morning mist when Sarah arrived. Daniel's truck was already parked along the fence, its headlights slicing through the fog like twin lances. He stood a few yards out, his figure a dark shape against the pallid grass. Sarah joined him, boots sinking into wet soil. Her throat tightened as she saw the body sprawled at his feet. Another shepherd, a man she recognized only vaguely from town. His arms were stiff, bent upward as though warding something off. The ground beneath him bore the same signature, a circle, black and exact, seared into the earth. Daniel's jaw clenched. 2 deaths in 3 nights. They'll call it a freak pattern, just weather. "Do you believe that?" Sarah whispered. His silence was answer enough. She crouched, inspecting the victim. No lightning rod this time, no strange talisman, but clutched in his hand, fingers charred closed around it, was a fragment of metal thin and bent, like a rib torn from an umbrella. Her breath caught. "It's spreading." Daniel shook his head uneasy. "Or it's choosing." They stood in the silence of the valley, listening. And then Sarah felt it, a vibration underfoot, subtle but unmistakable. The ground seemed to hum, a deep note rising from beneath the soil. The mist thickened, curling into shapes that almost resembled figures, not solid, not flesh, but shadows caught in fog. Sarah's pulse thundered as she realized the forms were circling them, mimicking the burn patterns in the grass. Daniel drew his revolver, though the gesture felt futile. What the hell are we supposed to shoot at? The low hum climbed into the air. It became a resonance, like voices whispering within the bones of the valley. The sound pressed against their skulls, words half-formed. Sarah thought she heard names: Elias, the new victim, and then her own. Her chest tightened. "It knows us." The sky, though clear when they arrived, began to fold into darkness. Clouds spiraled overhead, pulled into a vortex that centered above the pasture. Lightning forked silently within, as though preparing but not yet striking. Daniel grabbed Sarah's arm. "We have to leave." But when they turned, the fence line was gone. The pasture stretched endless in every direction, mist swallowing the familiar boundaries. The valley had closed around them. Sarah fumbled for the recorder, her instincts grasping for documentation even as fear consumed her. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Echo Valley phenomenon escalating. Storm localized above sight. Boundaries shifting. Possible. Impossible. Spatial distortion." A crack split the air, but no strike followed. The clouds pulsed with light, breathing. The umbrella in Sarah's bag quivered violently, rattling against the zipper. She yanked it free. Its ribs snapped open with a sound like bones breaking, though she hadn't touched the release. It pointed skyward, straining, as if drawn by an invisible hand. The voices in the mist surged. "Tongues, tongues," Daniel shouted over the roar. "Throw it away." But Sarah's fingers refused to obey. The handle burned hot against her palm, fusing her grip. She staggered, trying to release it, but the umbrella pulled her arm upward, aligning her body with the storm above. Daniel lunged, grabbing her wrist. His touch broke the spell for an instant. With a cry, she hurled the umbrella into the circle of scorched ground. It landed upright, impossibly steady. Its ribs shuddered, a black flower blooming toward the sky. The storm struck. Lightning poured down not in a single bolt, but in a column of blinding white fire. It engulfed the umbrella, splitting the air with a sound that seemed to tear time itself. The shockwave hurled Sarah and Daniel to the ground. For a moment, the world was nothing but searing light and silence. Then the light withdrew. The umbrella was gone. Not broken, not burned, gone, as if erased. In its place lay only a deeper circle, etched into the earth like a scar. Sarah's ears rang. She struggled upright, chest heaving. Daniel pulled himself to his knees, his face pale with horror. What did we just see? He gasped. Sarah swallowed, the taste of ozone thick on her tongue. It wasn't lightning. It was something using lightning. They both turned as the mist began to thin. The valley exhaled, releasing its grip. The fence line reappeared, the horizon restored. But Sarah knew the reprieve was temporary. The storm hadn't left. It had only marked them. That night, back in her cabin, Sarah couldn't bring herself to close her eyes. The recorder lay on the table, filled with fragments of whispers she didn't remember speaking. She played it back once, and nearly dropped the device when she heard her own voice overlapped by another, speaking in perfect sync. The voice said only one thing. Next, the word lingered in her skull, long after the playback ended. The official report would call it a natural disaster. 2 lightning deaths within a week, one shepherd after another. The records would cite freak atmospheric conditions, unusual conductivity, perhaps even climate change. Sarah typed the words herself, her fingers moving mechanically across the keys. But she didn't believe a single one. The evidence sat in her mind like a brand. The perfect circles, the umbrella that refused to obey gravity, the voices in the mist, the storm's hunger. No language of meteorology could explain that. Daniel wanted to forget. He'd said it outright as they drove back into town. We close this up. We never speak of it again. His eyes had been wild, a man clawing for the safety of denial. Sarah wished she could do the same. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alias's face astonished, not afraid, as if he'd been called by name. And beneath the astonishment, something else. Recognition. 3 nights later, the storm returned. Sarah sat alone in her cabin, staring out the window. The sky had grown heavy, sagging with clouds that pulsed faintly from within, like lungs breathing. The weather report claimed clear skies, but the valley never asked permission. The first thunderclap shook the glass. The sheep in the lower pastures scattered, their cries drifting upward through the night. Sarah rose slowly, almost resigned. She'd known this was coming. You couldn't trespass into the storm story and walk away untouched. On the table, her recorder blinked red. She pressed the button, her voice steady though her chest burned. Final entry. Echo Valley investigation. Subjective experience suggests the storm is not weather. It chooses targets. It remembers names. A second thunderclap rolled across the hills. Closer. If this is recovered, note the following. The valley does not forgive intrusion. Objects that point upward, umbrellas, rods, even voices raised become tongues. Invitations. The storm answers them. The cabin lights flickered. The air grew charged, heavy with the metallic tang of ozone. Sarah felt the hairs along her arms lift. The thunder spoke again, and this time it was not sound but language. Her name, drawn out and layered as though hundreds of voices spoke in unison. Sarah, her knees buckled. The recorder slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. She staggered to the window. Across the valley, lightning danced in silent arcs, crawling like veins across the sky. Each strike left another circle glowing faintly in the fields below, dozens of them, spreading outward in patterns too deliberate to be random. The valley was writing something. Her phone rang. Daniel. His voice broke through, frantic. Sarah, don't answer it. Don't even speak. But she already had. Her own name was echoing through the receiver. Not from him, but from something else on the line. A second voice repeating him, or perhaps using his words as a mouth. She dropped the phone. The storm arrived. Lightning struck the ridge just beyond the cabin, brilliant and blinding. Yet the thunder that followed was delayed, unnatural, like a voice waiting to be heard. The walls of the cabin rattled as if something vast pressed against them. sniffing at the seams. Sarah pressed her back to the door. For the first time, she understood Elias's expression. Not pain, not terror, recognition, because the storm had chosen her. Her thoughts spiraled in fragments. Could she run? Could she beg? Could she hide beneath the floorboards like the sheep pressed against the fence? No, you couldn't run from thunder. The cabin lights burst, plunging the room into darkness. The only illumination came from the valley itself. Circles burning into the fields, connecting, aligning into a spiral that pointed directly at her cabin. She whispered, barely audible, "Please," and the storm whispered back, "Never alone, never forgotten." The door shuddered. Rain slashed sideways, though she hadn't heard it begin. The air grew hot, oppressive, her lungs straining to draw breath. Somewhere beneath the roar of the wind, she swore she heard footsteps pacing in the soil, following the circles, drawing nearer. She clutched the recorder in her trembling hands. Its red light blinked like a heartbeat. She pressed it close to her mouth, forcing out the last words she might ever leave. Echo Valley remembers. And once it remembers you, you don't leave. Lightning struck. The sound split the world apart. When the neighbors found her cabin the next morning, the structure still stood, walls blackened but intact. No body was discovered inside. Only the recorder, lying on the floor by the window, its battery drained, tape filled with nothing but the endless sound of thunder repeating a single word. Sarah. Story 2. The father who came home. A memory made of nothing. They said New England winters could strip the world of its colors. Alex had grown used to the muted shades, the bleached clapboard houses, the pale sky, the gray ribbon of road winding through the forest. But inside his family's old house, color remained. His father had insisted on it. The old man filled the shelves with cracked leather books and framed maps, draped the kitchen in gingham cloth, and lined the hallway with photographs. A home must remember its people, he always said. Alex remembered. That was what frightened him most. He sat at the kitchen table that evening, fingers curled around a mug of coffee, gone lukewarm, eyes fixed on the window. Snow drifted lazily outside, catching the glow of the porch light. His father was supposed to be away 2 weeks on business in New York. He had waved goodbye at the station, watched the figure vanish into the crowd, suitcase bumping along behind him. The train had pulled away, and Alex had told himself, the house will be quiet for a while, just me in the snow. But it wasn't quiet now. Footsteps moved down the hallway. Slow, deliberate. The floorboards groaned under weight Alex knew too well. His breath caught as the sound drew nearer. And then the voice came. Calm, familiar. Alex, you're still awake? Alex turned. His father stood in the doorway. The same tweed coat, the same silver-threaded hair, the same weary but kind eyes. For a moment, Alex's heart surged with relief. You're home, Alex said, rising too quickly from his chair. I thought, his father smiled faintly. Yes, I came back early. Alex embraced him. The smell was the same. Faint tobacco, old wool. The embrace was solid, not some dream. And yet, as Alex pulled back, something cold trickled into his chest. When did you get back? He asked. His father tilted his head, as though the question confused him. I was traveling, but I came home tonight. Isn't that what matters? Alex blinked. Yeah, of course. He forced a laugh, though it fell flat. You must be starving. I'll heat something up. He turned toward the stove, but his father's hand touched his arm, gentle, firm. No need. I've already eaten. Alex paused. The cupboards were bare. He hadn't cooked since yesterday, and his father's lips looked dry, cracked as though untouched by water. Are you sure? Alex asked. I don't need much, his father replied. His smile held but his eyes. There was something distant in them. Not avoidance, not deceit, more like a fog where clarity should have been. Later, Alex lay in bed listening. The house had resumed its old rhythm, floorboards creaking, pipes clattering, the faint sound of his father moving about the study down the hall. It should have comforted him. Instead, it felt like the house had slipped back into a memory, playing the sounds it had once known by heart. He closed his eyes, replaying the goodbye at the train station. His father's hand had lingered on his shoulder, warm and heavy. The man had promised to call, to write, as he always did, and Alex had felt the ache of absence even before the train doors shut. So why did he feel the same ache now? with his father asleep under the same roof. Sleep refused him. At some late hour, he rose and padded quietly to the kitchen. The snow outside glowed blue in the moonlight, painting the room with a soft, cold light. He poured himself water, the glass trembling in his hand. A sound came from the study. Not pages turning or drawers opening, but a low hum almost like a voice murmuring to itself. Alex crept closer. The door was ajar, a sliver of lamplight spilling into the hallway. He peeked inside. His father sat in the armchair, eyes closed, lips moving. No sound escaped, though the rhythm was unmistakable. He was speaking, repeating something silently, as if mouthing a prayer. On the desk beside him, the family photographs caught the lamplight. Alex's throat tightened. He saw one frame turned face down, hidden deliberately. He knew which photograph it was without touching it, the one of his father in New York last year. Arms slung around an old friend, the skyline behind them. Why hide it? Alex stepped back, careful not to let the floor creak. He returned to bed, but sleep came only in fragments, broken by the image of lips moving in silence, eyes closed as though in imitation of rest. The next morning, Alex tried again. "Dad, how was New York?" His father looked up from the newspaper. "Busy. You know Howard Island. What did you do there?" The old man folded the paper carefully. His smile returned, the same gentle smile Alex had always trusted. "I was on business, Alex. Didn't I just get home? Isn't that enough?" The words landed wrong. Too polished, too evasive. Alex studied him closely. His father hadn't touched the breakfast Alex set out. Toast sat untouched, eggs cooling on the plate. The coffee was still full, steam long since faded. His father's hand rested near the cup, as if to create the illusion of having lifted it. A chill tightened Alex's chest. It was his father, and it wasn't. Alex carried the doubt with him like a stone in his pocket. Heavy, undeniable. Every glance at his father turned it over again, smoothing nothing, only making it sharper. The day passed slowly. Snow fell outside, covering the driveway in a white hush. The world seemed muted, as if waiting for something to declare itself. Inside, Alex watched. He left glasses of water around the house, casual offerings on end tables and countertops. His father never touched them. Plates of food went cold. Soup simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with the smell of onions and broth. But the old man only inhaled once and said, "That smells fine, Alex." He didn't sit, didn't reach for a spoon. By evening, Alex couldn't take it anymore. "Dad," he said, voice brittle, "you didn't eat lunch or dinner." His father glanced up from the armchair, his face serene. "I told you, I don't need much these days." "That's not true. You always ate. Remember last winter? You said no one can shovel snow on an empty stomach." The old man's eyes softened, but his smile stayed exactly the same. Too exact. "Yes, I said that. And yet here I am." Alex's hands curled into fists. He felt the sting of panic under his ribs. Later that night, he tried again, different angle. They sat together in the study, fire crackling in the hearth, shadows bent long across the floor. Alex brought out the old photo album, the one his mother had kept before she passed. "Do you remember this?" he asked, sliding a picture across the table. It was their family at the coast, years ago. His father had been laughing, hair mussed by salt wind. The man looked down at it, tilting his head. "Yes, we were happy." Alex swallowed. "Where was it taken?" For a moment, the old man hesitated, then, "By the water. You can see it there behind us." Alex's skin prickled. His father had known the exact spot, the name of the beach, the clam shack they'd eaten at afterward. This man, though, this presence, only echoed the obvious. He pushed another photo forward. His father's college years, standing beside the clock tower. "Where is this?" The man's voice didn't waver, but the answer was wrong. "That was work. A trip. I came back, didn't I?" The words rattled through Alex's chest like pebbles in a jar. He excused himself quickly, shutting the album and retreating upstairs. He could feel the old man's eyes on him as he left, calm, patient, watching. Sleep eluded him again. He lay awake, the house whispering around him. Each creak of the floorboards felt deliberate. Each sigh of the wind against the eaves felt like breath. At some hour past midnight, Alex heard movement, slow, steady steps down the hallway. He slid from bed, heart hammering, and eased the door open a crack. His father walked past in shadow, moving not toward the bathroom or the kitchen, but toward the attic stairs at the end of the hall. Alex followed at a distance. The old man climbed the narrow steps, each groan of wood loud in the silence. He pushed open the attic door, and dim light spilled out an oil lamp, though Alex hadn't seen one lit in years. Alex crept up, barely daring to breathe. Through the crack, he saw his father sitting in the center of the attic floor, surrounded by boxes of old photographs. The lamp flickered over his face, hollowing it into something unreadable. One by one, he picked up photos and turned them face down. A pile grew beside him, family pictures, trips, birthdays. Alex's throat went dry. His father wasn't looking at them. He was erasing them. At last, the old man froze with one photo in his hand. Alex leaned forward, straining to see. It was a picture of his father, young, strong, smiling, taken at a work conference in New York. The man's fingers traced the image slowly, almost tenderly. Then he whispered, voice low but audible, "He's still away. I'm only here until he returns." Alex stumbled back, the words rattling in his skull. His heart pounded as he crept down the stairs, back into the dark hallway. He shut his bedroom door quietly, pressed his back to it, and tried to steady his breath. His father, if he could still call him, that was not his father. He was something else, something left behind. When dawn broke, Alex knew he had to test it directly. The truth could no longer be avoided. At breakfast, he poured 2 glasses of water. He slid one across the table. "Drink with me," he said. His father looked at the glass, then at Alex. The pause stretched long enough for the clock on the wall to tick 4 times. "Finally," he said gently, "I don't thirst." The words were simple. Final. Alex's skin prickled. "Then what are you?" The old man smiled, and the fog in his eyes deepened. "I am your father. That is enough." But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. The storm outside had gathered slowly all afternoon. By nightfall, it wrapped the house in steady wind and sharp gusts of snow. The windows rattled. The walls moaned faintly, as if the house itself wanted to speak. Alex sat at his desk with the lamp burning low, pretending to read. But his eyes wandered again and again toward the study where his father sat in silence. The man hadn't moved in hours, only stared at the fire with his hands folded neatly in his lap. No book, no drink, no shifting posture, just waiting. Alex couldn't endure it any longer. He rose, heart hammering, and slipped quietly upstairs. The attic had always smelled of dust and cedar. He pulled the chain on the bare bulb, casting a pale light over rows of boxes. His breath showed in little white clouds. The insulation had never been good up here. He opened the nearest box. Photographs, hundreds of them, tucked into yellowing envelopes. Birthdays, vacations, his parents' wedding. All the images of a life lived in fragments. He sorted quickly, almost feverishly, until his hand froze on one. It was his father, the real one. Alex recognized the smile instantly, broad, genuine, unguarded. His father stood on a busy sidewalk, New York skyline rising behind him. The date scribbled on the back in his mother's handwriting. September 12, last year. His father had been there, alive, away. The memory of watching him board the train suddenly twisted in Alex's mind. He hadn't returned early that time either. Weeks had passed before his father came back. So who had sat across from Alex at dinner? Who had walked the hallways humming softly under his breath? A cold certainty bloomed inside him. The man downstairs was not his father. He was something else, a shadow made of memory. The attic floor creaked. Alex spun, clutching the photograph like a shield. His father stood in the doorway, framed by the weak light. His face was calm, but his eyes locked onto the photo in Alex's hand. "What are you doing up here?" The voice was gentle, but it carried an undercurrent like strings pulled too tight. Alex swallowed hard, looking. His hand shook as he held the photo higher. This is you, the real you, in New York, last year." The old man's gaze softened almost sadly. "Yes, he was away." "Was?" Alex demanded. His throat burned. "What are you then? You don't eat, you don't drink, you don't answer anything real." The man stepped closer into the attic, the floor groaning under his weight, but his expression never changed. Still kind, still patient. "I am here because he could not be. I am what he left behind, so you would not be alone. Alex's chest heaved. You're not him. I am enough of him. The words landed like stones. Alex's grip on the photo tightened. He stared at the smile of the real man, then back at the presence before him. The differences screamed at him now, the absence of appetite, the vagueness, the way the man only echoed. You're a memory, Alex whispered. A memory pretending to live. The man tilted his head, almost approving. Yes, a memory made of nothing, but sometimes nothing is enough to keep you safe. Alex backed toward the stairwell. Stay away from me. The old man did not follow. He stood quietly in the attic, the lamplight flickering against his unmoving frame. You don't understand, the man said. His voice was softer now, almost pleading. I was left here to protect you. That is all I am. That is all I can be. Alex fled down the stairs, clutching the photograph to his chest. He locked himself in his bedroom, his breaths coming ragged, the words echoing in his mind. A memory made of nothing. The house settled around him. The wind howled outside. Somewhere in the distance he thought he heard the attic door closing. And then silence. But Alex knew silence was never empty. The next day, sunlight struggled through the snow clouds, pale and weak. Alex hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of his bed with the photograph clutched in his hand, its edges damp from sweat. Down the hall, the house was unnervingly still, as if holding its breath. When he finally emerged, his father was waiting in the kitchen. The old man sat at the table with the newspaper open, just as he always had, the ritual of normalcy preserved. But the paper was upside down. Alex felt a surge of defiance. He could no longer pretend. You don't read, Alex said flatly. The man looked up, eyes calm. I do. I always have. You don't eat. You don't drink. You don't live. His father's smile faltered, the first crack Alex had ever seen. I am here. Isn't that enough? No. Alex slammed the photo down on the table. The image of the real man alive, away gleamed in the dim light. This is you, and you're not him. You're an echo, a shadow. The old man's lips trembled, as if rehearsing 1,000 denials. But instead he whispered, yes, an echo, a memory that was left to keep you safe. Alex leaned forward, heart hammering. Then tell me something only he would know. Tell me what Mom said the night she died. The man's mouth opened. No sound came. His hands trembled against the paper. Alex pressed harder. What did she say? Silence. The construct's eyes shimmered, not with tears but with emptiness, as though the space inside him had been asked for more than it could hold. You can't, Alex said. His voice broke. Because you weren't there. You weren't real. The man's smile collapsed altogether. His skin seemed to dull, as though light no longer clung to it properly. He looked suddenly smaller. His shoulders bent under a weight that wasn't there before. I was left behind, he whispered. Only for you. Only so you wouldn't be alone. Alex felt his anger twist into something sharper. Fear. Because the figure wasn't just weakening, it was unraveling. That night, the unraveling grew worse. Alex lay awake, the house groaning in the wind. He heard his father's voice drifting down the hallway. At first, it was soft, a murmur like before, but then it grew louder, fractured, words breaking apart like shards. Home? Always? Home? Alex rose, heart in his throat, and crept toward the study. The door was half open. Inside, the man paced in circles, his movements jerky, unnatural. He touched the spines of books without opening them, shuffled papers without reading. His lips moved ceaselessly, forming fragments of borrowed phrases. Alex stepped into the doorway. Stop it. The man froze. His head turned slowly, unnaturally, like a puppet whose strings had tangled. His eyes glowed faintly in the lamplight, wide and lost. You shouldn't look too closely, he said. His voice stuttered on the last word, splitting into echoes. Closely, closely, closely. Alex's stomach lurched. You're not him. You're breaking. The man reached toward him, fingers trembling. I am here. That is all you need. Don't. His voice glitched again, unraveling into silence. Alex stumbled back, clutching the doorframe. The figure swayed once, then steadied. The old man's smile returned, but it was wrong now, crooked, strained, as though stitched together. Go to bed, Alex, he said, his voice thin. We have tomorrow. And sec. Alex backed away, retreating into the hall. He pressed the door shut, his chest heaving. He realized the truth in his bones. The more he questioned it, the weaker the thing became. It couldn't withstand scrutiny. It could only persist as long as Alex allowed himself to believe. And Alex no longer believed. The following morning, the kitchen was empty. No newspaper, no waiting figure. For the first time since his father's return, the chair sat vacant. Alex almost felt relief until he noticed the faint imprint on the wood grain of the table, as if hands had rested there for hours. The impression pulsed faintly, like the residue of heat. The memory wasn't gone. Not yet. Alex sat down slowly. He placed the photograph on the table and whispered, "You're not real. You can't stay." The house answered with silence. But from upstairs came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, exactly like the ones that had announced his father's impossible return. Alex rose, pulse pounding, knowing he had reached the end. One way or another, this would finish tonight. The house was dark. Only the wind moved, rattling the windows, whispering against the shutters. Alex sat at the kitchen table, the photograph laid before him like a compass pointing toward truth. His pulse thudded in his ears, louder than the storm. He waited. The footsteps above continued, slow and deliberate, pacing the length of the hall. The sound carried weight, but not presence. It was like the echo of a life once lived, reverberating long after the voice had gone. Then silence. Alex's phone rang. The sound tore through the stillness, sharp and jarring. He snatched it up, his hands shaking. "Hello?" A voice answered, warm, real, tired. "Alex, it's me, his father, his real father. I just got off the train," the man said. "Back from New York. I missed you. I'll be home by the weekend." Alex's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to shout, to confess everything, but the words tangled in his mouth. You're coming home?" "Yes," his father said gently. "This time for real." The line clicked. Silence. Alex lowered the phone slowly. From the corner of the room, the figure emerged. His father's double stood there, shadows clinging to his frame. His expression was softer than ever, almost fragile. "You see?" the figure whispered. "I was only here until he returned." Alex backed away, heart hammering. "You're not him. You were never him." The figure smiled sadly. "No, but I was what you needed." Even as he spoke, his body began to blur, edges fraying like old cloth. His form wavered, transparency seeping through. The air shimmered where he stood, as if the house exhaled him. Alex pressed against the wall, unable to move, unable to look away. The figure's voice trembled. "Do not be afraid. Memories are only meant to hold you until life comes back." And then, like mist in morning sun, he was gone. The chair stood empty. The table, bare. Only the faintest scent of tobacco and wool lingered in the air, vanishing with every breath Alex drew. For a long time, Alex remained frozen, the phone still in his hand. The storm outside eased, snow falling in gentler sheets, but the silence inside the house was heavier than ever. He looked down at the photograph of his father, the real man, alive, returning. Relief should have washed over him. Instead, an ache deeper than fear filled his chest, because the house was truly empty now, and Alex understood something terrible. He missed the echo. Story 3. The Three Wives. The Secret Beneath the Floor. The train left Eleanor at a windswept platform, little more than stone steps leading down to a muddy road. London was 20 miles behind her, but the city felt a century away. Out here, on the edge of the moors, houses kept secrets and the air itself seemed older. She adjusted the strap of her satchel, tugged her coat tighter, and looked ahead. On the hill stood the house she had come for, a Victorian mansion, vast and sagging, its gables clawing at the gray sky. A crooked iron gate marked the entrance, and a long gravel path wound up through overgrown hedges. Perfect, she thought, her pulse quickening, exactly the kind of place her readers craved. She was 26, hungry for reputation, and her new book, Unsolved Tragedies of the English Countryside, would make her name if she did it properly. And at the heart of that book would be Sir Alistair Harrow. The man had wealth, reputation, and scandal. 3 wives, each dead, officially natural causes, tragic accidents, but the papers whispered, Servants quit quietly. Neighbors turned their eyes away. Eleanor had written to him politely, asking for an interview. To her surprise, he had invited her himself. "Come, I have nothing to hide." Now the house loomed above her. Its windows glinted faintly, though most were curtained shut. The door creaked open before she touched the bell. A servant in a black coat, tall and hollow-eyed, admitted her with a nod. The hallway smelled of old wood and something faintly sweet polish or perfume. She couldn't tell. Portraits lined the walls, faces of men and women with eyes too, alive for oil paint. "Sir Alistair is waiting," the servant said, his voice dry as parchment. He led her through dim corridors until they reached the drawing room. Sir Alistair Harrow sat in a high-backed chair by the fire. He was older than she expected, late 70s, perhaps with a body that seemed both frail and imposing at once. His hair, white and fine, framed a face lined deeply, but his eyes were bright, sharp, alive with something that was not entirely welcome. "Miss Eleanor Vale," he said, voice smooth but carrying a rasp at the edges. "The young authoress who would put my sorrows into print." Eleanor bowed her head slightly. "Only with your blessing, Sir Alistair. I hope to treat your story with dignity." He smiled faintly. Dignity. That's rare in writers these days. The servant withdrew, closing the door. The fire popped, sending shadows stretching across the Persian rug. Eleanor pulled her notebook from her satchel and perched on the edge of the sofa, pen ready. "Shall we begin?" Alistair's gaze lingered on the flames. "You want to know about my wives?" "Yes," Eleanor said softly. "The world does too. People have questions." He chuckled, though it was a dry, humorless sound. "People always do." Eleanor began gently, establishing rhythm. "You married 3 times. Each union ended tragically. Some call it misfortune. Others," she let the sentence trail off. Alistair looked at her then, his eyes narrowing but not unkind. "Others call it curse or crime. I know what they whisper. That's why you're here, isn't it? To find out whether the monster is sitting before you." Her cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I'm here to listen, to let you tell it your way." He studied her, then nodded. "Good. Listen then." The fire crackled as he leaned back, hands resting lightly on the chair's arms. "My first wife, Margaret, was a gentle soul. She loved music, filled this house with piano until the walls themselves sang. But one winter evening, she suffered a seizure in the music room, a sudden, merciless failure of the heart. She died before I reached her side." His voice softened, almost tender. "The doctor said it was congenital. Nothing could be done." Eleanor scribbled notes quickly, her pen scratching across the paper. The words sounded polished, rehearsed, but sorrow still clung to them like old perfume. "And your second wife?" she asked. Alistair's eyes flicked toward one of the portraits above the mantel, a pale woman, painted with a silver locket against her throat. "Clara," he said. "She was bright, restless, always longing for London. She despised the quiet of this house, yet she stayed. For me." His mouth curved downward. "One summer night she collapsed in the garden. The same verdict as before. Her heart. The doctors told me I was cursed with fragile companions. Imagine that. Cursed." The word lingered in the room, heavy as the smell of smoke. Eleanor wrote quickly, but unease began to nibble at her. 2 wives, same fate. Both hearts failing suddenly, both pronounced natural. She wanted to ask if he'd questioned it himself, but she swallowed the thought for now. Too early. The fire hissed, and for a moment, Eleanor thought she saw movement in the rug beneath Alistair's chair, like the floor settling, or something breathing under it. She blinked, pen pausing. The floor was still. When she looked up again, Alistair was watching her, eyes sharp. "Do not let your imagination carry you away, Miss Vale," he said softly. "This house already has enough shadows." Eleanor forced a smile. Of course, but her hand trembled slightly as she wrote. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Inside, the room felt warmer, almost too warm, as though the fire burned hotter than before. Eleanor straightened in her seat, forcing professionalism into her voice. "Sir Alistair, will you tell me about your third wife?" The old man's gaze flickered, not to the fire, not to the portraits, but to the staircase visible through the open door at the far end of the hall. His expression hardened. "Yes," he said, "but her story is..." different. And the fire popped again, scattering embers across the grate. The shadows seemed to lengthen, curling toward Eleanor's notebook. She swallowed, poised to write. Sir Alistair leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. She did not die of the heart. No, she fell. She fell down the staircase. The fire popped and hissed, as though it too strained to listen. Eleanor steadied her notebook, pen trembling slightly against the paper. "Tell me more about Margaret," she said, her voice soft. Alistair's eyes drifted toward the piano in the far corner, its ivory keys dulled by time. Margaret filled this house with music. She believed silence was a kind of death, so she kept the piano open, played even when her fingers ached. You could walk the grounds at night and hear her practicing through the windows Mozart, Schubert, sometimes her own melodies. Even the servant said the air felt lighter when she played. His face softened, but only briefly. And yet one evening, in that very room, she faltered mid-piece. A single wrong note, then silence. By the time I reached her, she was collapsed on the stool, eyes wide, breath gone. Eleanor's pen scratched across the page. Was there any sign beforehand? Symptoms? Complaints? Alistair shook his head. None. She was healthy, vigorous, but the heart can betray us without warning, Miss Vale. You of all people should know that writers live on coffee and cigarettes, do they not? His attempt at humor did not disguise the tightness in his jaw. Eleanor forced a smile but pressed further. And the doctors confirmed? They confirmed. His tone was sharp now, final. Eleanor shifted, unsettled. Her instinct told her the story had been rehearsed too many times, polished, worn smooth like a stone turned over in the hand, again and again. And Clara? Eleanor asked after a pause. Alistair's expression changed an indulgent smile that carried the faintest edge of cruelty. Clara was different. Where Margaret loved quiet, Clara loved chaos. Parties, crowds, late nights in the city. She found this house suffocating, called it a mausoleum with curtains. Still, she stayed. For me, he leaned back, eyes glittering. She collapsed in the rose garden one summer evening. I remember it vividly. The air was thick with the scent of blossoms, and she had just been laughing when she fell. Her hand still clutched the stem of a rose, thorns in her palm. The doctors gave the same verdict. Her heart, the same curse, striking again. Eleanor shivered. And you accepted that? Alistair's gaze snapped to hers, sharp as a blade. What choice had I? Should I accuse fate? Should I blame the earth for taking what it wants? His words echoed through the room. Eleanor bent her head to her notes, but her hand trembled. Something in his voice, calm, rational, yet edged with something unspoken, made the hair along her neck rise. Her eyes flicked to the portraits again. Margaret in a pale gown, Clara with her locket, each woman preserved in oil, eternal. But as Eleanor studied them, she noticed something odd. The same background stretched behind each. The house's drawing room, with the same patterned rug, the same heavy drapery. Not typical portraiture, where backgrounds were often stylized or neutral. No, these women had been painted firmly in place, as if to tie them forever to the house. Did they pose here? She asked suddenly. Alistair's mouth curved faintly. Where else? Most sitters prefer studios. I preferred the truth. They belonged here, and now they remain here. The way he said it belonged made Eleanor's stomach twist. The fire dimmed slightly, as though the room itself exhaled. Eleanor glanced toward the rug under her chair. Had it shifted? No, just her nerves. But she remembered the strange impression she'd had earlier, the sense that the floor beneath Alistair had stirred. Her instincts, sharpened by years of research into unsolved tragedies, whispered that something wasn't aligning. Two wives, both sudden failures of the heart, both memorialized in portraits that seemed more like claims than tributes. She decided to probe. Sir Alistair, forgive me, but do you never wonder at the coincidence? Two young women, healthy, gone the same way. Some might suspect. She trailed off, watching carefully. Alistair's face did not change. His eyes glowed in the firelight, unwavering. Suspect what, Miss Vale? That I killed them? That my hand stopped their hearts? Is that the tale you'd like for your readers? Eleanor swallowed. I only mean that the repetition is unusual. His chuckle was low, humorless. Unusual. Yes, and yet it happened. Twice. That is all. Unless you think the house itself took them, the words slipped into the air like smoke. Eleanor's pen hovered above the page. The house? She echoed. Alistair smiled faintly. You've felt it, haven't you? This house is no mere pile of bricks. It listens. It remembers. Sometimes I wonder if it chooses what stays. The fire hissed, throwing sparks. Eleanor shivered despite the heat. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words pressing between them. Eleanor forced her pen back to the page, but her thoughts ran elsewhere. He doesn't deny suspicion. He deflects. He suggests the house itself took them. Is that superstition or confession? The storm outside rattled the shutters again. Somewhere above, a faint creak echoed as though someone walked the floorboards overhead. Eleanor's head snapped up, but Alistair remained perfectly calm, eyes on the fire. When she glanced back down, she realized her hand had scrawled something unconsciously in the margin of her notes. Beneath, she didn't remember writing it. Alistair stirred at last, his voice low, deliberate. Would you like to hear of the third? Eleanor's pen stilled. The fire's glow deepened, shadows stretching long across the floorboards. Yes, she whispered. Tell me about her. Alistair's gaze drifted to the darkened hall, where the staircase loomed in shadow. She was different from the others, he said. She saw things the others did not. Shadows, whispers. She was not taken by her heart. No, she fell. His voice dropped to a rasp. She fell because she looked too closely at what lived beneath this house. The storm outside pressed harder against the house. Snow smacked the shutters, rattling them like bones in a chest. The fire in the grate seemed to burn lower, its glow smothered by a darkness that crept from the corners of the drawing room. Sir Alistair leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped loosely, eyes fixed on the shadows. My third wife, he began, was called Isabel. She was younger than the others, quick-witted, sharp-tongued. She had a way of walking through this house as if it belonged to her, as if its history would bend to her curiosity. Eleanor adjusted her notebook, but her hand shook slightly. The way he said belonged carried the same unsettling finality he'd used before. She disliked the portraits, Alistair continued, said they stared too long. She asked why I kept them, why I insisted on painting each wife in these rooms rather than in some studio. She had a way of asking questions that cut deeper than they seemed. And then, his mouth twitched faintly. She began to notice the house itself. The house? Eleanor prompted, her voice lower now, aware of the strange heaviness in the air. She said she heard noises, footsteps where none should be, voices in the walls. Once, she told me she had seen shapes moving on the staircase. Black shapes. She called them shadows, but not cast by anything. Shadows that walked as though they had their own will. Eleanor's pen scratched, the sound too loud in the thick silence. And what happened? She fell, Alistair said simply. One night, late, she had been in the library. I heard her steps on the stairs, then a cry, and by the time I reached her, she lay broken on the tiles below. The doctor said there was no drink in her blood, no imbalance, nothing to cause such a fall. She was steady, healthy. She simply went down. He looked at Eleanor at last, his eyes glinting. But I remember what she told me that morning. She said, "There are shadows on the stairs, Alistair. They wait at the landing." The fire hissed violently, spitting sparks across the rug. Eleanor flinched, then steadied her breath. "And you saw nothing?" Alistair's voice grew colder. "I saw her body. I heard her neck break when she struck the floor. What else matters?" Eleanor's pen hovered. Her instincts screamed. The way he described it, flat, precise, almost clinical, did not sound like grief. It sounded like observation. Silence stretched. Eleanor closed her notebook slowly, meeting his gaze. "Do you believe her? That there were shadows?" Alistair chuckled softly, leaning back. "Miss Vale, I have lived in this house longer than you have lived in the world. Do you think I do not know its shadows?" The fire guttered, its light paling, leaving more of the room drowned in darkness. For a heartbeat, Eleanor thought she saw movement in the doorway, something standing at the base of the staircase beyond. But when she blinked, the hall was empty. She forced herself to speak, her voice thin. If she was right, if something in this house made her fall, then she discovered too much, Alistair interrupted. And the house claimed her, just as it claimed the others. Do you understand now? Eleanor's pulse hammered. She wanted to ask, was it the house, or was it you? but the words clung to her tongue heavy as stone. Instead, she whispered, "And you? Why has the house not claimed you?" Alistair smiled faintly. "Perhaps because I do not resist it. Perhaps because I am part of it now." The floor beneath Eleanor's feet creaked, long and low, as if something deep below shifted its weight. She pressed her notebook to her chest and tried to steady her breathing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the storm clawing at the walls. Eleanor realized her interview was no longer about the wives, it was about survival. She glanced at her notes. The words she had scribbled unconsciously earlier beneath seemed almost to pulse on the page. "What is beneath this house, Sir Alistair?" she asked before she could stop herself. His eyes glittered in the dim firelight, and his voice came out in a near whisper. "Not everything buried stays buried." The fire died down to embers. The house refused to sleep. After Alistair's story, Eleanor retreated to the guest chamber upstairs. But rest never came. The storm howled against the eaves, and each gust of wind made the beams groan like voices rising from the walls. She lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her notebook clutched tight, the word beneath etched across her mind like a bruise. At last, she rose. She lit the small oil lamp left on the dresser, its flame trembling, and crept barefoot into the hall. The corridor stretched ahead, dim and cold. The staircase yawned in shadow. She glanced toward it and froze. For a moment, she thought she saw dark figures shifting on the landing shapes without edges, like stains in the air. But when she blinked, the space was empty. Only the steady drip of rainwater somewhere above marked the silence. Her hand tightened around the lamp. She whispered to herself, "It's just a house, just wood and stone." But the house seemed to whisper back. She descended into the main floor, the drawing room now cold. The fire burned down to ash. Alistair was gone, his chair empty, though the cushion still bore the impression of his weight. Eleanor set the lamp on the desk. Her eyes fell on a set of rolled parchments stacked neatly in a wooden tube. Curiosity pricked. She tugged one free and spread it across the surface. It was a floor plan, not only of the house above, but of something below. A chamber sketched directly beneath the drawing room, accessible by a narrow passage from the cellar. Her breath caught. A hidden room, beneath the floor. The ink was faded, the edges brittle, but the details were clear. Dimensions, reinforcement beams, notes in the margin written in a slanted hand. One note caught her eye. For safekeeping, her pulse quickened. She thought of Margaret, Clara, Isabel. Safekeeping for whom? The cellar door groaned as she pushed it open. The lamp's glow spilled down narrow stone steps slick with damp. The air grew colder, dense with the odor of earth and mildew. The cellar stretched long, lined with casks and crates covered in dust. At the far end, a section of wall bore scrape marks, as if something heavy had been dragged repeatedly across it. Eleanor raised the lamp and saw it. A seam, the faint outline of a door, disguised as stone. Her heart hammered. She pressed her hands against it. It yielded slightly, then swung inward with a reluctant sigh. The passage beyond was narrow, low-ceilinged, the floor packed earth. She ducked through, every step stirring echoes. The smell deepened, sweet, cloying, the unmistakable scent of rot that clung to places memory tried to forget. At last, the tunnel opened into a chamber. The lamp flame flickered, painting the space in trembling light. The chamber was small, rectangular, its walls braced with beams long darkened by moisture, and there across the packed earth floor were impressions. Long, shallow indentations. Eleanor's breath snagged. They were graves, 3 of them. At the head of each mound lay remnants. A cracked locket, a broken comb, the faint outline of a shoe's buckle. She crouched, trembling. Her fingers brushed the soil. It was loose, as if disturbed not long ago. She staggered back, bile rising in her throat. The wives had not died where the records claimed. Their bodies were here, hidden beneath the floor. Her lamp guttered. She clutched it desperately, breath coming fast. And then she heard it, a voice, soft, ragged, from behind her. "Do you see now?" Eleanor spun. Alistair stood in the doorway, his face half lit by the trembling flame. His eyes gleamed with a terrible serenity. "You were right to look," he said softly. "Most never do." Her voice broke. You put them here. I kept them here. he corrected. Safe. Together. The world would not understand. But the house does. The house keeps what is given to it. The chamber seemed to press closer, its walls breathing. Eleanor stumbled back, lamp shaking in her hand. You murdered them. Alistair stepped inside, his shadow stretching long across the graves. They belonged to the house, Miss Vale, just as you do now. The floor beneath Eleanor's feet creaked, not wood, but earth shifting, settling. She felt it then, something moving under the soil. Slow, patient, hungry. She raised her lamp high, voice trembling. Stay back. Alistair smiled faintly, as if indulging a frightened child. The house already knows you. It wrote the word for you in your notebook, did it not? Beneath. It has been calling you since the moment you arrived. The graves stirred. Soil shifted as though something below pressed upward, yearning to rise. Eleanor screamed, bolting for the passage. Her lamp swung wildly, shadows flailing against the walls. She burst back into the cellar, slamming the hidden door shut behind her. But the echo of Alistair's voice followed, muffled yet clear. You cannot leave what the house remembers. The cellar door slammed shut behind Eleanor, the echo rattling through the beams above. She stumbled backward into the dark, lamp shaking in her hand. Her breath came ragged, loud against the hush of the house. She needed to leave. Now, the stairs loomed ahead, stone slick with damp. She rushed upward, her lamp flame guttering with each panicked step. Her shoulder hit the door at the top, locked. From the cellar below, a voice floated upward, calm, patient. Don't fight it, Miss Vale. You've already been chosen. Eleanor slammed her fists against the door. Help. Somebody help me. Her cries died in the silence. No neighbors lived near enough to hear. The storm outside drowned every sound, its wind clawing at the shutters like 1,000 fingernails. The lamp guttered once more, then steadied. She forced herself down again, across the cellar floor, searching desperately for another exit. That was when she noticed the rug above, through the cracks in the beams. She saw the drawing room floor overhead. The Persian rug stretched across it, heavy, ornate. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized something else. The rug wasn't lying flat. The wood beneath it bulged upward, as though something pushed against it from below, and with each heartbeat, it moved. Alistair's voice drifted through the dark, closer now. He had not climbed the stairs. He did not need to. His words came from the walls themselves. Margaret resisted at first. Clara, too. Isabel nearly uncovered the truth. But in the end, they all returned to where they belonged. The house keeps its own. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, clutching her notebook like a shield. Her mind screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something. But her legs trembled, refusing to move. She whispered, "Why me?" And the voice answered, not Alistair's alone, but layered with others. Women's voices, whispering from beneath the soil. Because you looked too closely. The floor trembled. The rug above surged once, then tore. Soil poured through the cracks, spilling into the cellar like a wound opening. Eleanor screamed, bolting toward the hidden passage again. But the door she had slammed before now stood open, yawning like a mouth. The chamber beyond pulsed with faint light, as though the graves themselves glowed. She skidded to a halt. Alistair stood in the threshold, his figure pale, his eyes gleaming. "You see?" he said softly. "You've always belonged here. The house was waiting for you." The ground lurched beneath her. She fell to her knees, lamp shattering against stone. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint luminescence spilling from the chamber. Hands brushed her ankles. Not flesh soil, loose and cold, curling like fingers. She kicked, clawed at the floor, but the earth only tightened its grip, dragging her inch by inch toward the open chamber. "Stop," she shrieked. "Please, stop." Alistair knelt, his face inches from hers, calm as a priest delivering final rites. "It isn't me you must beg," he whispered. "It is the house." The soil surged. Eleanor's body was dragged across the cellar floor, her nails leaving desperate gouges in the wood. The voices rose all around her, Margaret, Clara, Isabel chanting in whispers that sounded like breath on her ear. Beneath, beneath, beneath. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the portrait-lined hallway above, the painted eyes of 3 women watching as the floor closed over her. When morning came, the storm had passed. The house stood silent, dignified, its windows shuttered. Sir Alister sat once more in his high-backed chair. The fire rekindled. His servant entered quietly, carrying the day's paper. "Will Miss Vale be staying longer, sir?" the servant asked. Alister smiled faintly, eyes on the flames. "The house will see to her," he said. The servant nodded, as though that explained everything, and withdrew. Alister closed his eyes. Somewhere deep below, the house settled contentedly, as though another piece of itself had fallen into place. Story 4. The Night Road. Groans beneath the ground. Tokyo never truly slept, but the outer districts had their own kind of silence. It was not the silence of peace, but of neglect, the hush of streets, where neon lights sputtered and died, where vending machines buzzed weakly, where stray cats darted between rusted fences. Yumi walked quickly, her school bag thumping against her hip, her breath clouding in the cool night air. The train had been delayed again, and now the shortcut through the old back street was her only way home before curfew. She told herself she had done it dozens of times, that the alley was safe enough, but tonight the shadows felt heavier. The alley ran narrow, walls of concrete closing in like gray jaws. A single street lamp flickered halfway down, its light sickly yellow. The air carried the damp smell of rainwater mixed with the metallic tang of rusting pipes. Beneath it all was something else faint, earthy, like soil freshly disturbed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from her mother. "Where are you?" "Almost home," she whispered aloud, though she didn't type a reply. Her fingers felt clumsy, unwilling to fumble with the screen in the dark. She tightened her grip on her bag strap and pressed on. Halfway down the alley, she slowed. The sound reached her first. A faint tap, tap, like something small rolling along the pavement. Then her shoe brushed against it, a round object, bouncing lightly before settling. A marble, she thought. Children's toys always ended up in strange places. But when she crouched to look, her stomach tightened. The thing was round, yes, but its surface was not glass. It was soft, yielding slightly when the toe of her shoe nudged it. Under the weak lamplight, it glistened faintly, pale with a dark center. Yumi bent closer, her breath catching. It wasn't a marble. It was something that looked disturbingly like an eye. She recoiled, straightening too fast, her head spinning. The object sat motionless on the ground, blank, watching nothing. Her chest hammered. "It's just a trick," she muttered. "Just a toy." But even as she turned away, her skin crawled with the certainty that it had not been there when she last walked this path. The alley stretched longer than it should have, each step echoing too loudly. Yumi tried to shake the unease, focusing on the street lamp ahead. That was when she heard another sound, metal against metal, faint but insistent. Clink, clink, clink. At the end of the alley, beside a crooked wooden door, an old man hunched with his back to her. His hands fumbled at a lock, keys jingling. His head tilted slightly, listening, though his eyes never lifted. A white cane leaned against the wall beside him. He was blind. Yumi slowed, uncertain. The man muttered softly, frustration in his voice as the key scraped uselessly in the lock. "Excuse me," Yumi said quietly, her voice trembling more than she intended. The old man turned toward the sound, his face lined and weary. His clouded eyes blinked rapidly. "Ah, someone's there." His voice rasped. "I can't seem to. These old locks. Would you help me, child?" Yumi's throat tightened. She looked back down the alley. The pale, round object still lay on the pavement, untouched, as if waiting. She turned back to the old man, his hand extended blindly, offering the heavy brass key. "Please," he said again, almost pleading. "Just a moment of your time." The wind hissed softly through the alley, carrying with it a low sound. Not the rustle of leaves, nor the buzz of wires. A sound from beneath her feet, so faint it could have been her imagination. A groan. The brass key was heavy in Yumi's palm, its teeth worn smooth with age. The blind man's hand lingered in the air, trembling slightly until she accepted it. His cloudy eyes fixed on nothing, but his head tilted toward her as though he were listening to her very breath. "Just the middle keyhole," he said softly. "It sticks." Yumi crouched before the door, lamplight flickering weakly behind her. The lock was rusted, the iron plate pitted with years of weather. She pushed the key and it slid halfway, then caught. She twisted. Nothing. Her brows knit. She tried again, angling the key, forcing it with a grunt. Still nothing. The mechanism didn't budge, not even a click. Behind her, the old man stood perfectly still, hands clasped before him. His lips moved faintly, as though mouthing words to someone she could not hear. Yumi swallowed. It won't turn. His head tilted, the movement sharp, bird-like. Try again, harder. She braced the key between her fingers and twisted. Metal scraped, shrieked. Still nothing. Her arm ached with the effort, and then faint, unmistakable, the ground beneath her shoes shuddered. A vibration, as though something deep below shifted against the earth. Yumi froze. The blind man's lips curled faintly. You feel it, don't you? Her breath hitched. She turned to glance down the alley. The marble-shaped thing still sat on the pavement, pale and wet, gleaming as if it had rolled closer. Its dark center seemed to catch the lamplight like a pupil. Her throat tightened. What? What is that? She whispered. The old man said nothing. His cloudy eyes blinked, his expression unreadable, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward, the hint of a smile. Yumi tore her gaze from the object and shoved at the lock again, desperate to make it work. The key refused. It felt as though the door itself resisted her. Each time she twisted, the vibration returned, stronger, resonating up through her knees, her chest. A low sound rose from beneath the street. Not the whine of pipes, not the hum of electricity. A moan deep, human, muffled by layers of soil. She recoiled, dropping the key. It clattered against the stone step, echoing far too loudly in the alley's narrow throat. The old man bent slowly, his fingers searching for the fallen key, but his hand stopped an inch short, hovering, as though he already knew exactly where it had landed. Pick it up, he murmured. Yumi backed away, her hands trembling. Her heel nudged something soft. She glanced down. Another marble-like orb had rolled against her shoe. Her stomach lurched. This one was not pale. It was bloodshot, streaked with tiny red veins. Her breath came ragged. The groan beneath the earth swelled, like multiple voices dragging through mud. Please, the old man said. His voice was calm, but his fingers gripped the air in front of him with quiet desperation. Open the door. Yumi's heart pounded. She glanced down the alley. The way out was only a few dozen steps away, but the path seemed darker now, the street lamp flickering as though ready to die. And in that gloom, she swore the pale orbs were multiplying, scattered like offerings across the pavement. Each one stared. She pressed herself against the door, forcing the key back into her palm. Her voice trembled. This isn't right. None of this is right. The old man tilted his face toward her. Though his eyes were clouded, they seemed to fix on her perfectly. His whisper curled like smoke. You've already woken them. The key refused to move. Yumi twisted until her wrist ached, until sweat dampened her palm despite the night chill. But the mechanism resisted as though something inside the lock were bracing against her. Harder, the old man urged. His voice was low, steady, almost hypnotic. The house wants you to try harder. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The house, she whispered. The ground shifted again, this time more violent. She staggered, bracing against the doorframe. From beneath the pavement came a groan so deep it vibrated her ribs. It wasn't a single voice now, but many, tangled and straining like sleepers trying to wake. Yumi's breath came ragged. What is that sound? The old man's head turned slightly, his pale eyes searching the air. You hear them now. Good. Most do not, until it's too late. Her hand froze on the key. Them? He smiled faintly, a crack in his weathered face. The ones below. The street lamp flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The alley plunged into a darkness so thick the old man's figure blurred into shadow. Only the faint glow of her phone screen in her pocket reminded her the world still existed beyond this suffocating corridor. Something moved behind her. Not the wind, not the shuffle of a cat. Heavy, wet, a dragging sound, like flesh pulled across stone. Yumi spun, eyes straining. The pale orbs scattered along the ground glistened faintly in the darkness, catching what little ambient light there was. They weren't still anymore. They rolled, slowly, as though guided by invisible hands. Their dark centers glimmered, fixed on her. Her stomach lurched. They weren't marbles. They weren't toys. They were eyes, torn from faces she could not see. A chorus of groans welled up from the soil, louder now, as if the very earth were straining to birth something. Yumi pressed her back against the door, her voice cracking. "Help me, please." The old man tilted his head, listening. "I already did. I brought you to them." Her skin crawled. "Why?" His smile widened, teeth catching what little light remained. "Because I cannot open the door myself." The key in her hand burned cold. She tried once more to turn it. This time it shifted a fraction, just enough to click. The vibration beneath her feet grew frantic, as though hundreds of fists pounded against the underside of the street. Her eyes darted to the alley's mouth. The way home was there, but a shape now blocked it. It stood motionless at the far end, half hidden in the gloom, human or almost. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an impossible angle, as though straining to see her with eyes that weren't there anymore. The dragging sound grew louder. Yumi's breath hitched, her vision swimming. The ground beneath her shuddered, the chorus of groans swelling into something close to a scream. And in the dark she understood. She was no longer alone in the alley. The alley seemed to shrink around her. Walls pressed inward, air thick with damp earth and the metallic tang of rust. Yumi's chest heaved as the chorus below grew louder, groans turning into something closer to words, fragmented syllables pushing up through layers of soil. The figure at the far end shifted. Its neck jerked upright, bones cracking audibly across the distance. Even in the dark, Yumi saw its mouth, a ragged slit too wide, open as though gasping. No sound emerged. The voices came from beneath the street, but the thing's lips moved in time with them. Beneath, come down. Yumi gagged on a sob. "What is happening?" she cried, her voice breaking. The blind man stood beside her, calm as a priest before an altar. His hand rested on the locked door as though in reverence. "They call," he said simply. "They've always called. Tonight, you answered." "I didn't." Yumi pressed her back against the door, clutching the key so tightly it cut her palm. "I just wanted to go home." The old man's smile stretched faintly. "And you will. Everyone goes home eventually into the ground." The figure at the alley's mouth stepped forward. Each motion was slow, deliberate, limbs too long for its body. Its bare feet dragged, leaving wet smears on the pavement. The scattered eyes rolled toward it, aligning like offerings. Yumi's legs shook. Her instincts screamed to run, but every path was blocked, the door locked, the alley sealed by this nightmare, the ground itself heaving with restless hunger. She turned to the blind man, desperate. "Please help me." "I am." He lifted his head, his clouded eyes reflecting nothing. "I helped you already. I gave you the key." His voice dropped, tender but cruel. "You're the only one who can open it. Only those with eyes still in their heads can let the door turn." Yumi stared at him, horror dawning. The key. It hadn't been meant for him. It had been meant for her. Bait on a hook. Her breath came fast, ragged. "You knew." His lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "Of course. I live here. I feed them. It is the only way they leave me be." The ground split with a sharp crack, a seam racing down the center of the alley. Dust and grit erupted upward. Yumi screamed, stumbling against the wall as the fissure widened. Beneath, she glimpsed movement-pale hands clawing through soil. Too many fingers, too many wrists tangled together. The figure blocking the exit staggered closer. In the weak glow of her fallen phone, Yumi saw its face clearly at last, or what was left of it. Its skin sagged in ribbons, eyes absent. In their place were dark sockets, wet and red, streaming with thin threads of blood that dripped onto the pavement. Yet it watched her all the same. She felt its gaze, searing, invasive, sliding along her skin like knives. Yumi choked on a cry, stumbling back toward the door. The key slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the stone. Immediately, the chorus beneath surged. Hands clawed higher, reaching toward the surface, dragging at the edges of the crack. The ground's moan became a howl. The blind man turned toward her, his expression serene. "Pick it up." "No," she screamed. "Pick it up," he repeated, his voice like commandment. "Or they'll take you anyway." The figure was close now, its steps wet, deliberate. It crouched, its torn mouth spreading wider than any jaw should. The chorus beneath echoed its movement, dozens of unseen throats opening in a single wail. Yumi lunged for the key, fingers closing around the cold brass. She shoved it into the lock again, twisting until her wrist burned. The mechanism resisted, shrieking metal against metal. The ground trembled harder, the pavement splitting wider, and the blind man whispered with something like devotion, "Yes, yes, give them what they're waiting for." The lock shifted. A single, reluctant click. Behind her, the door groaned. Yumi dared to hope just a crack, just enough for escape when the blind man pressed his hand against the wood, holding it shut. His strength shocked her. His wiry arm did not tremble. Her eyes went wide. "Why? Because you are theirs now," he said softly. "I was only ever the usher." The figure loomed over her, the stench of rot filling the air. The crack in the ground yawned wide, soil splitting open as if the earth itself were inhaling. Dozens of pale hands reached upward, grasping. Yumi clawed at the key, the lock, the door. Anything but the old man held it steady, smiling faintly as the voices rose. "Listen," he whispered. "Do you hear how they rejoice?" And Yumi did. Beneath the ground, beneath the trembling stones, came a symphony of groans and wails, hungry, eager, triumphant. The door would not yield. Yumi twisted the key until her wrist screamed with pain, but the wood held firm under the blind man's steady palm. His touch was gentle yet immovable, like stone worn smooth by centuries of rain. "Please let me go," she begged, voice ragged. His pale eyes blinked slowly, expression unreadable. "If I let you go, they'll take me instead. And I've lived long enough to know who the house prefers." The words froze her blood. He was bargaining with them, always had been. Her life for his silence. The fissure in the alley floor yawned wider, gaping like a wound. From its depths, pale hands clawed at the air, nails black with soil, fingers bent at odd angles, yet all grasping hungrily toward the surface. Their touch scraped stone. Their moans rose into a wailing chorus that drowned even the storm above. Yumi's vision swam. Her legs threatened to buckle. She looked toward the alley's mouth and wished she hadn't. The figure was closer now, only a few paces away. In the weak glow of her phone's light, its face emerged from the gloom. It was not faceless nor eyeless, but something far worse. A face made of many faces, skin stitched together, eyes embedded at grotesque angles, some blind and cloudy, others fresh, red-veined, still wet. They blinked out of rhythm, rolling in confusion, each one seeking her in its own direction. Its mouth tore wider, revealing not teeth but fragments of other mouths pressed together, whispering in broken unison. "Come down, come down, come down," Yumi screamed, stumbling against the door, pressing herself flat against its unyielding surface. The blind man leaned close, his voice low and tender, like a father soothing a child. "It's no use. They've already seen you." "I didn't do anything," Yumi sobbed. "I just wanted to go home." He tilted his head. "And now you will. Everyone goes home. Everyone returns to the ground." The soil surged upward, hands bursting through the crack, clutching at her ankles. Cold fingers wrapped her skin, dragging her down with startling strength. She kicked, screamed, clawed at the doorframe, but each second more hands found her, pulling, tugging. The old man stepped back, his cane tapping lightly against the stone as though in benediction. "It is better not to fight. They hate when you fight." Yumi's nails scraped splinters from the wood. "Help me, please." Her eyes darted to the figure. It crouched low now, face shifting as the embedded eyes rolled toward her. One eye bloodshot, glistening, matched the very orb she had kicked at the start of the alley. The realization struck like a blade. She had woken it, disturbed its offering, and it had marked her from the moment her foot touched it. The stitched mouths opened wider, issuing a groan that echoed the earth itself. The scattered orbs on the pavement rolled toward its feet, reattaching themselves into its grotesque flesh. And still, all those eyes fixed on her. The ground buckled. Yumi's legs sank to her knees in the widening fissure. Soil poured over her, crawling like insects beneath her uniform. She shrieked, her voice torn raw, but the chorus below rose louder, drowning her out. Beneath, beneath, beneath. Her final glimpse of the world above was the blind man, standing calm against the wall, head tilted as though listening to a distant melody. Then the earth swallowed her whole. The alley fell silent. The fissure sealed itself, leaving only a thin seam in the pavement. The scattered orbs rolled back into the shadows, vanishing as if they had never been. The figure at the alley's mouth straightened, its many eyes fluttering closed in eerie unison. Without a sound, It dissolved into the darkness. The blind man turned the key gently in the lock. This time, the mechanism yielded with ease. The door opened inward. He stepped inside, his cane tapping on the floorboards. Before closing the door, he paused, whispering into the night, "She's yours now." The door shut softly. The alley stood empty once more, except for the faintest echo rising from the soil. Not a moan this time, but something quieter. A girl's sobs, muffled, deep below the ground. Story 5. The Child. An unseen enemy. Chicago nights pressed close against the glass. From her sixth-floor window, Emily could see the city's glow smeared across the clouds, a restless orange haze that never allowed for true darkness. The streets below thrummed with distant traffic and the occasional shout drifting up from the sidewalk. Yet inside her apartment, everything was quiet. The only sound, the gentle hum of the radiator and the faint cooing of her daughter in the next room. Emily sat on the couch, a mug of tea cooling beside her, hair still damp from a hurried shower. She had the look of someone always tired but always moving, sleeves pushed up, hands restless, shoulders taut. At 27, she had learned that exhaustion could live in the body like a second heart, beating even when the rest of her wanted to stop. Still, when she heard the soft babble from the nursery, something inside her softened. She set aside the tea, padded across the worn carpet, and pushed the door open. The crib stood beneath the glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. Inside, her daughter Lila sat clutching a soft blanket, eyes wide and curious. She was nearly 15 months old now, at the age where every sound, every color, was a discovery. Emily leaned over the crib, brushing a stray curl from the child's forehead. "Couldn't sleep, huh?" Lila babbled, stringing sounds together that almost resembled words. Her tiny hand reached up, touching Emily's chin. Emily smiled. She was raising Lila alone, and the days were long commutes across the city. A part-time job that barely covered rent, endless cycles of laundry and dishes. But in these moments, when the world was reduced to this small, bright pair of eyes, it felt worth it. She lifted the girl into her arms, breathing in the familiar warmth of baby shampoo and milk. "You and me," she whispered. "Just us." The apartment was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen tucked into the corner of a crumbling brick building, but Emily had tried to make it gentle. Shelves of second-hand books filled the walls, bright paper mobiles dangled from the ceiling, and the fridge door was crowded with magnets holding photographs and sticky notes. On the living room rug, Emily spread out a set of board books. She settled Lila onto her lap, opening one with a faded picture of a cat on the first page. "See? Cat," Emily said, tapping the image. "Meow." Lila's eyes followed her finger. Her mouth opened. For a moment, nothing. Then, clear and small. Meh. Emily froze. The child tried again, more certain this time. "Meow." The word landed clumsily but unmistakable. Emily laughed, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes, cat, meow." She hugged her daughter tight, rocking back and forth. "You said it, sweetheart. Your first word." Lila giggled, delighted at her mother's reaction, and tapped the picture again. "Meow." For a long while, they stayed like that, mother and daughter, words tumbling into the space between them, the city outside forgotten. Later, after Lila finally drifted to sleep, Emily lingered in the doorway of the nursery. She watched the gentle rise and fall of the small chest, the faint glow of the nightlight painting soft shadows across the walls. It was in those shadows, she often felt, that her loneliness pressed hardest. The building creaked as it always did, pipes expanding, neighbors moving in the unit above, but tonight the sound seemed sharper, as though the walls themselves were listening. She shook off the thought, closing the door gently. Back in the living room, the board book lay open on the rug. The cat stared up from the page with wide, printed eyes. Emily smiled faintly and whispered, "Meow," to the empty room. She didn't notice how, in the nursery, Lila stirred, her small hand lifting toward the darkened corner of the wall, as though something there had caught her attention. The next morning dawned gray, light seeping weakly through the blinds. Chicago traffic rumbled distantly, horns sharp against the hum of the city waking up. Emily stirred on the couch. She had fallen asleep there again, half-dressed, blanket tangled around her ankles. The sound of babbling pulled her upright. Lila was awake. Emily padded into the nursery, rubbing her eyes. Her daughter sat in the crib, cheeks flushed, curls mussed from sleep. She was holding the corner of her blanket, patting it rhythmically against the mattress. "Good morning, sunshine," Emily whispered. Lila looked up and squealed. "Mama." Emily froze. Her heart surged with warmth so sudden it nearly hurt. She gathered the baby into her arms, pressing her face into the child's neck. "Mama," she repeated softly, voice trembling. "Yes, I'm Mama." The word hung in the air like a fragile miracle. Later that day, Emily set aside chores to sit cross-legged on the rug with her daughter. The board books were spread around them again, their corners softened from constant use. "Let's try," Emily said, flipping one open to a bright red apple. "Apple." Lila clapped her hands. "Appa," Emily gasped, grinning. "Yes, apple." She kissed her daughter's cheek, overwhelmed by how quickly everything seemed to be changing. They went through the pictures: dog, ball, Sunday. Each time Lila attempted the word, sometimes clumsy, sometimes startlingly clear, Emily felt as though she were watching a door open, her daughter stepping into a world of language that had been locked until now. Hours later, as Emily folded laundry, Lila sat beside her, babbling to herself. At one point, the child crawled to the bookshelf, tapping the spine of a worn paperback. "Book," she said. Emily blinked. She hadn't taught that one yet, but there it was, sharp and unmistakable. "Book," Emily echoed slowly. She felt a shiver of pride, mingled with unease. Children pick things up quickly, she reminded herself. Still, the precision startled her. That evening, after dinner, Emily carried Lila into the living room. The radiator clanked, filling the silence with bursts of metallic heat. Outside, the wind pushed hard against the glass, rattling the panes. Emily sat with her daughter on her lap, pointing at objects in the room. "Lamp, lum," Leela said. "Chair, chair." Each word landed more confidently than the last. Emily felt her heart swell, yet something inside her tightened too. The child's tone sometimes carried a strange gravity, as though repeating not simply what she heard, but something she already knew. Emily shook it off. "Don't be silly. She's just learning." But later, as she set her daughter down on the rug, Lila crawled to the far wall. She sat back on her heels, gazing at the blank plaster with unusual intensity. Emily frowned. "Sweetheart, what are you looking at?" Lila raised a tiny hand and pointed. Her lips moved. Emily leaned closer, expecting another word she could praise. Instead, the baby whispered, soft and deliberate, "Shadow." Emily's smile faltered. She turned. The wall was bare. No lamp cast its outline. No shape broke the monotony of plaster. Only the faint glow of the nightlight seeped in from the hall. She turned back quickly. "What did you say?" Lila tapped the wall with her finger. "Shadow." The word was clear. Certain. Too certain. Emily's skin prickled. "There's nothing there, honey. Just the wall." But the child kept pointing, eyes wide, as though something moved in that blank expanse her mother couldn't see. Emily pulled her daughter into her arms, heart racing, whispering into the soft curls, "It's nothing. It's nothing." Yet even as she said it, she couldn't shake the image of her baby naming the invisible with the same confidence she'd used for apple, cat, book. And the radiator hissed louder, almost like a breath escaping the wall itself. Emily tried to tell herself it was nothing, a fluke, a child's mind jumbling sounds, echoing syllables without meaning. She repeated that lie through the rest of the night, even as she tucked Lila into her crib, even as she sat awake on the couch with the TV flickering unheard. But the word lingered, refusing to fade. Shadow, and the way Lila had said it, too precise, too deliberate, sat heavy in Emily's chest. The following afternoon, Emily spread blocks across the rug, colorful shapes that Lila loved to stack and knock down. The board books were scattered nearby, still open to bright pictures. Emily watched her daughter with the fierce intensity of someone waiting for proof. "Say cat, say mama. Anything normal. Where's the ball?" she asked, picking up the red sphere. "Ball," Lila said, reaching for it. Emily let out a shaky laugh. "Good. Yes, ball." They went on dog, book, chair. Each word landed like a fragile reassurance, thin threads of normalcy tying her back to sanity. And then Lila's gaze drifted. Her eyes locked onto the far wall again, the same patch of blank plaster near the radiator. Her body went still, block in hand. Emily's throat went dry. "Sweetheart?" Lila raised her hand, small finger outstretched. Shadow. Emily's skin prickled. The sound was the same word, but different now, lower. The syllables heavier, dragged out as if her daughter's vocal cords had been pulled deeper in her throat. It was not a baby's babble. It was a voice trying itself on through the child. Emily's breath hitched. "No," she whispered half to herself. "No, honey. There's nothing there. Just a wall. Just a wall." But Lila's eyes stayed fixed, unblinking, as though something in that plaster stared back. That night, Emily couldn't bring herself to sleep. She left every lamp on, shadows stretching sharp against the corners of the apartment. The radiator hissed, pipes groaned. The city outside pulsed with its restless life. But beneath it all, she thought she heard another sound, a faint dragging, like fabric sliding against stone. When she checked the nursery, Lila was awake, standing in the crib, her small hand pressed against the wall. She wasn't crying. She wasn't babbling. She was listening. Emily's heart pounded. She stepped inside quickly, scooping her daughter into her arms. Enough. Enough of this. The child squirmed but didn't protest. Her lips brushed against Emily's ear as she whispered again. "Shadow." The voice was deeper this time, too deep for such a small throat. Emily staggered back, clutching her child so tightly she began to wail in protest. "Stop it," Emily cried, her own voice cracking. "Stop saying that." The apartment fell silent except for Lila's cries. But when Emily turned toward the wall, she thought just for an instant that something darker than paint lingered there. A smear, a ripple, gone when she blinked. Emily paced the living room until dawn, Lila finally asleep against her shoulder. Her mind spun, frantic. Children had imaginary friends, didn't they? They pointed at nothing. They invented things. That's all this was. But deep down she knew. She had heard the weight in that word, had felt her child's body stiffen as though channeling something not her own. Her daughter had named the thing that lived with them, and it had borrowed her voice to say hello. The first sign came with the radiator. For weeks it had groaned and hissed in harmless protest, the sound of an old building fighting the cold. But now, as Emily prepared Lila's breakfast, the noise shifted. It wasn't a rattle or a hiss, but a low, steady moan. Lila froze in her high chair, spoon in hand, her head turned toward the wall. Emily's heart seized. "No," she said too sharply, voice breaking. "Eat, sweetheart, just eat." But Lila raised a finger. Her lips moved. "Shadow." The word was almost reverent. Emily dropped the spoon. It clattered against the bowl, milk splashing across the table. Her knees weakened. She forced herself to laugh. The sound brittle. "It's just the pipes, baby. Just the pipes." But even as she said it, the moan in the radiator deepened, resonant, as if something inside pressed against the metal. That night, Emily left the lights on in every room. The apartment glowed like a beacon, shadows shoved into corners where she could keep her eyes on them. She sat on the couch with Lila asleep in her lap, too afraid to leave her in the crib. The city outside hummed, but inside the apartment, time stretched thin and brittle. At some hour past midnight, the lights flickered. Not all at once, one at a time, like someone moving through the rooms and brushing each switch. Living room, kitchen, hall. Emily's breath came fast. She clutched Lila tighter. "It's nothing. It's nothing." But then the shadows moved. Not flickered, moved. Across the far wall, a darkness uncoiled itself, long and thin. It stretched upward, then sideways, as though testing its reach. Emily's pulse slammed in her ears. "No," she whispered. The shadow bent, deliberate, forming the outline of a head cocked at an angle, watching. She stood, her legs trembling, and backed toward the door. Lila stirred, whimpering, her eyes fluttering open. Emily pressed a hand against her daughter's hair. "Don't look. Don't you look." But Lila turned anyway. Her small finger lifted from Emily's shoulder, pointing directly at the wall. "Shadow," she said, her voice deeper than sleep, a tone borrowed from something that was not hers. Emily's stomach lurched. She bolted for the nursery, slamming the door shut behind them. Her chest heaved. She fumbled with the lamp, flooding the room with weak yellow light. The walls stood blank. The crib, the dresser, the stacks of books ordinary, but the air pressed heavy, as though the space were crowded with something unseen. She laid Lila down on the rug, desperate to steady her hands enough to think. The child giggled suddenly. reaching toward the far wall. Her eyes sparkled with delight, as though greeting a friend. Emily followed her gaze. At first, she saw nothing, just plaster, faintly cracked. Shadows pooled where the lamp's glow didn't quite reach. Then it shifted. A ripple, subtle but undeniable, passed across the surface, like a curtain brushing in a breeze. Emily's throat went dry. She stepped closer, her hand rising despite herself. The wall felt colder than stone, damp beneath her fingertips. The ripple came again, spreading outward in waves. From the corner of her eye, she thought she saw a shape behind it. Tall, thin, pressing forward. Her knees buckled. She staggered back, scooping Lila into her arms. No, you're not here. You're not real. But the wall pulsed again, and this time a sound came with it, a whisper low and ragged, threading itself into her ear. We see you. Emily clamped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. She knew then. This wasn't her imagination. The apartment wasn't haunted by echoes or memories or tricks of tired eyes. Something was inside the walls, and it had been watching them all along. Emily had always told herself the apartment was safe, a place of walls and locks, a high floor above the restless city. But as she stood there clutching her daughter, staring at the wall that pulsed like living skin, she understood the truth. The enemy was already inside. Her arms shook from holding Lila. The child giggled, squirming to be set down, her fingers still pointing toward the wall as though urging her mother to see more clearly. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps. No, she whispered. Not you. You don't look. But Lila wriggled harder, her small voice deepening with borrowed tones. Shadow. Damn. Emily's strength broke. She lowered her daughter to the rug. The baby crawled forward eagerly, stopping only a few feet from the wall. Her eyes sparkled as though she were meeting someone familiar. She reached out her hand, palm open. Emily's legs nearly gave way. She forced herself closer, her own hand trembling as she pressed it against the cold plaster. At first, there was only the damp chill. Then, the ripple came again. The wall throbbed beneath her fingers, a subtle pulse like a vein under skin. And then the dark stain spread, shaping itself into something more. It was not a shadow cast by light. It was a presence with form, a head tilted forward, pressing from the inside, its outline faint but undeniable. Hollow eyes stared through the plaster, as if the barrier was glass. Its mouth stretched wide in a grin that did not belong to any human. Emily staggered back, a cry tearing from her throat. The wall bulged, the ripple spilling outward as though the figure might step through at any moment. Behind her, Lila clapped her hands, delighted. Shadow, she whispered again, the word rolling deep and alien through her small throat. Emily grabbed her daughter, clutching her close. Though the child protested, she backed into the corner of the room, her eyes never leaving the wall. The figure inside pressed closer. Its grin widened, and then it moved. Not outward, but sideways, gliding within the wall, its eyes never blinking as it slid across the plaster. Watching, waiting. Emily's chest tightened. She understood then. This was no passing vision, no hallucination. It lived here. It had always lived here. And her daughter could see it as clearly as she could see the moonlight on the floor. The radiator groaned. The lights flickered. The shadow moved faster, darting back and forth just beneath the surface, testing the seams. Emily whispered into her daughter's hair, though her own voice trembled. Don't answer it. Don't ever answer it. But Lila only giggled again, eyes fixed on the wall. The whisper came, soft and ragged, threading from the plaster to the air. We are here. We will always be here. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, rocking her daughter back and forth as though the motion could erase the world. When she opened them again, the wall was blank. No ripple, no face, just cracked plaster and faint stains of damp. The silence was worse than the noise, because she knew it hadn't gone. It had only stepped back, waiting. The next morning, Emily made her daughter breakfast as though nothing had happened. She washed dishes, folded laundry, opened windows to let the city noise rush in. Normal life performed like a prayer. But every time Lila turned toward the wall and whispered, "Shadow," Emily's skin crawled. And each night, when the radiator moaned and the lights flickered one by one, Emily sat awake in the glow, clutching her child, whispering to herself, "The enemy is already inside. It lives in the walls. And it is watching us both." Story 6. The Heat. The Locked Room. John awoke to the taste of dust in his mouth. It clung to his tongue, gritty and dry, as though the air itself had thickened overnight. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light that leaked in through a narrow seam in the ceiling. The room around him was small, too small. 4 walls of warped wood pressed close, their boards stained and swollen with age. He sat up sharply, heart pounding. He didn't remember lying down here. He didn't remember a door opening or closing. All he knew was that he was trapped. The ceiling sagged low enough that he could reach up and touch it without stretching. The floor beneath him was uneven, sloping slightly toward one corner where water must have once seeped in. The smell was faintly sour, like mildew and old smoke. Panic clawed at his chest. He pushed himself to his feet, stumbling across the narrow space. His palms pressed against the nearest wall, searching for seams, for hinges, for something. He found nothing but rough wood. Splinters bit into his fingertips as he scraped along the grain. "Hello," his voice cracked in the silence. "Hey, can anyone hear me?" The sound died immediately, swallowed by the walls. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time seemed to warp inside the box. John's breathing grew louder, filling the silence with its jagged rhythm. He pressed his ear against the boards, straining. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. He pounded once, hard. The echo came back dull, muted. Then he noticed it. The air was warmer than it should have been. Not stifling yet, but heavy, as though the room had been sealed tight for too long. He pulled at his collar, sweat already prickling at the base of his neck. "God," he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. The heat settled low in his chest, making each breath harder than the last. His memory returned in fragments, useless scraps. He had come to New Orleans on business, renting a room in one of the old houses off Esplanade Avenue. The place was crumbling but cheap, a mansion split into apartments. Its walls smelled of history, of rot, of something left too long in the wet Louisiana air. He remembered the landlord's half-smile, the way he'd said, "Every house down here keeps secrets, son. Don't go poking where you don't belong." And now here he was, in one of those secrets. John pressed harder against the far wall, his fist slamming once, twice, again. "Hey, somebody. I'm in here." The boards vibrated faintly beneath the blows but held fast. He leaned against them, chest heaving. Then faint, almost imagined. A sound. Something brushed against the other side. He froze, pressing his ear to the wall. The scrape came again, deliberate, slow, like fingernails dragging along the wood. "Hello?" His voice cracked. The scrape stopped. Silence pressed heavier than before, and then a new sound. A single knock. Soft, hollow. John stumbled back, pulse hammering. He waited, straining. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by what might have been a voice, faint, muffled, too garbled to make out. He pressed forward. "Help me. I'm stuck. Please, get me out." The voice rose in pitch. Not words, screams. His blood ran cold. The air thickened as though the room itself had exhaled heat. Sweat dripped from his temples, soaking the collar of his shirt. He tried to steady his breath, but the warmth pressed against his lungs, heavy and relentless. He backed into the center of the room, eyes darting from wall to wall. The seams between boards shimmered faintly in the dim light. Not with water, with heat. The wood was warming beneath his touch. He pressed his palm flat against one plank. It burned. John's chest heaved, panic flooding his veins. He stumbled back to the corner, the scrape of his shoes echoing in the cramped space. The silence beyond the walls shattered into pounding fists, dozens of them, slamming the boards from the outside. Voices rose, indistinct but furious, layered into a chorus of screams. The room seemed to vibrate with their rage. John clutched his head, dropping to his knees. "No, stop!" But the pounding only grew louder, and the heat rose. John threw himself at the wall again, shoulder slamming into the boards hard enough to rattle his teeth. Pain jolted down his arm, but the wood did not yield. The room groaned around him, not with the sound of impact, but with a deeper resonance, like the walls themselves were alive, echoing the violence back into his bones. He staggered back, gasping. Sweat poured down his temples. His shirt clung to his skin as though he'd stepped into a furnace. "Come on," he rasped. "Come on. Open." He fumbled for the seams where the door must have been. His fingers traced the lines, splinters digging into flesh, until they found the faint outline of a latch. He clawed at it desperately. Locked. Solid. He pulled harder, nails bending, skin splitting. A sharp sting of blood filled his palm, but the latch refused to move, and all the while the heat climbed. The air shimmered. His vision blurred as the corners of the room wavered like a mirage. Each breath was heavy, scorching, as though he were swallowing smoke even before he saw it. His lungs rebelled, chest tightening. From the other side of the wall came the pounding again. Fists, dozens of them, hammering in a rhythm that had no pattern. Frantic, angry, John pressed his ear to the wood despite the burn. Voices bled through, muffled but desperate. "Let me out, please, oh God." The words tangled, overlapping, impossible to follow. It sounded like a crowd pressed shoulder to shoulder against the walls, screaming, demanding. John recoiled, bile rising in his throat. He staggered to the center of the room, staring at the boards as though they might split to reveal the mob outside. But no, there was no outside. This room was buried. These voices came from nowhere, or worse, from below. His skin prickled as though every pore tried to push the heat away and failed. He ripped at his shirt, tearing it open at the chest, but it did nothing. The pounding escalated, shaking the entire chamber now. Dust rained from the ceiling, coating his sweat-slick arms. John coughed, lungs screaming for air. "Stop it!" he yelled, throat raw. He slammed his fist against the nearest wall, mimicking the rhythm. "Stop it!" For a heartbeat silence, then a laugh. It wasn't the laugh of one person. It was hundreds of voices layered into one hideous chorus, pressing through the wood like smoke. John's legs gave out, dropping him to his knees. He pressed his palms against his ears, rocking forward. No, no, no. The laugh dissolved into screams again, high-pitched, tearing, as though the walls were filled with burning throats. The air grew hotter. He crawled toward the corner, where the board seemed weaker, darker with age. He braced himself and kicked. Once, twice, a third time. Splinters flew, but the wood did not break. The heat singed his skin now, rising from the boards themselves. His hands blistered when he touched them. He smelled his own flesh cooking. God! He recoiled, clutching his burned palms against his chest. Smoke curled from the seams in the wall, thin and gray, carrying the acrid sting of burning timber. His eyes watered, his lungs seized. Through the smoke, shadows writhed, not from the fire but from the shapes pressed against the walls. Faces, dozens of them, mouths open in silent screams, eyes rolling in agony. They melted as quickly as they appeared, replaced by others. John stumbled back, choking. Not real, not real, but the blister on his palm said otherwise. Somewhere deep within the walls, something struck back. A blow from the other side rattled the chamber so violently he thought the boards would split. He fell, shoulder smacking the floor. The voices rose again, united now, one hideous command that pierced through the wood. Burn! The word rolled like thunder, vibrating through his bones. John scrambled to his feet, clawing at the latch again, ignoring the sting of splinters and blood. He pulled with everything he had, muscles screaming, but the latch did not move. The boards beneath his feet glowed faintly red. Heat seared through his shoes, through the thin sole, into his flesh. He howled, staggering toward the far wall. There was no escape, not yet, but he swore through the smoke, through the screams, through the fire licking at the edges of the chamber he would find a way out. Because if he didn't, this house would take him as it had taken the others. And he would become one more voice in the burning walls. Smoke seeped through the seams like fingers, curling into the chamber in gray ribbons. It stung John's eyes, clawed at his throat. He coughed hard, doubled over, the force racking his chest until black dots danced before his vision. The room was shrinking. Not literally, though. The walls pressed in close enough to make it feel so, but with the way the smoke and heat stripped him of space, he could no longer pace. Each breath carried fire into his lungs. Each step made his knees quake. He staggered to the wall again, pressing his blistered palms flat against the boards. "Please," he rasped. "Someone." His plea cut short. The wood was pulsing. He felt it under his palms, steady, rhythmic, a heartbeat. He stumbled back, eyes wide. The walls weren't holding him in. They were alive. They were waiting. The pounding outside returned, sharper now, almost frantic. Fists slammed against the walls in overlapping rhythms, as though a crowd beat upon the chamber in unison. Voices bled through with the blows. Help us. They burned us. Let us out, let us out. John clutched his ears, staggering in circles, smoke choking him. The cries grew louder, closer, as if the voices were right beside him. It spun. Faces swam in the smoke, women, men, children, each one twisted in agony, their mouths wide, teeth blackened, eyes streaming ash instead of tears. One pressed close, lips almost brushing his ear. Join us, John screamed, swinging his arm through the phantom. The smoke dispersed, then gathered again, forming new faces. They pressed forward, whispering in broken tones. You're one of us. They'll never let you go. The house eats. His chest burned. He collapsed to his knees, coughing, hacking up black phlegm. The heat seared through his skin, prickling like needles. He clawed at the boards beneath him, desperate for cooler air, for any escape. But the wood was hot enough to burn his fingertips. He snatched his hands back with a cry, skin blistering anew. The smoke thickened. The light from the ceiling seemed dimmed, smothered. The chamber was night now, lit only by faint glows where the wood threatened to ignite. In the dark, the voices grew clearer. John, his name, whispered by dozens of mouths. He froze, trembling. How do you know my name? A laugh swelled in response, a chorus that shook the boards. We know them all. His mind spun. He remembered the landlord's warning. Every house down here keeps secrets, son. He thought of the sagging walls, the way the floorboards had creaked like tired lungs when he'd first moved in. Had this house always been a tomb? He pressed his forehead to the hot boards, tears cutting through the soot on his cheeks. Please, I don't want to die here. The wall vibrated beneath him. Something on the other side pressed close, so close he felt its breath through the seams. Then burn, it whispered. John staggered back, choking. His lungs seized. Each breath scraped raw, dragging smoke deeper inside. He dropped to the floor, crawling toward the corner where the smoke pooled thickest, hoping, absurdly, for a draft, for a gap in the boards. Instead, he found more faces. The smoke thickened there, forming a crowd that leaned down over him. Familiar faces. His mother, her eyes hollow. A childhood friend, mouth stretched in a scream. His first love, skin scorched, hair aflame. They bent close, whispering in voices that were his own memories. You left us. You'll never leave here. You belong to the fire. John shook his head violently, eyes burning with tears. No, you're not real. But their hands reached out, smoky tendrils curling around his wrists, his throat, pulling him down to the floor. His body grew heavy, sinking, as though the house itself were dragging him into its foundations. The pounding rose to a fever pitch now, rattling the chamber. Boards groaned, smoke roared. John clawed at the floor, gasping, trying to stay conscious as the faces swirled around him, each whispering the same word, burn. He coughed until blood filled his mouth, hot and coppery. His vision dimmed. The chamber tilted, his body sliding into the slope where the water stains marked the boards. His strength waned. His voice failed. And in the heavy dark, as his body sagged against the burning wood, John realized the house was not merely killing him. It was claiming him. The first lick of flame came through the floorboards. It started as a faint glow seeping up between the cracks. Then a sharp hiss as resin in the wood caught fire. In seconds, thin tongues of orange licked upward, snapping hungrily at the smoke. John staggered back, shielding his face with one blistered arm. The chamber brightened in pulses, shadows jittering across the warped boards. The heat roared, his skin prickled, sweat evaporating the moment it formed. Every breath seared his throat like swallowing hot coals. His lungs screamed, God, no, he croaked, stumbling to the wall. He clawed at it desperately, his nails splitting as he raked down the boards. The pounding outside grew louder, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. Fists, feet, foreheads, the cacophony of the damned. Voices joined in, rising above the roar of fire. Burn with us, burn with us. The flames surged higher, racing up the walls, searing away the shadows that had taunted him before. Faces appeared in the blaze, contorted, laughing, screaming, burning into the wood itself. John pressed his back against the last unlit wall, chest heaving. His mind spun in wild loops. There had to be a way out. There had to. His gaze caught on the ceiling. A seam of light. Faint. Narrow. But real. His heart lurched. There. He stumbled to the corner, dragging the broken chair leg he'd wrenched earlier from the floor. He balanced it against the wall, clambering upward as flames licked at his heels. The wood sagged beneath him, smoke blinding his eyes. But he kept climbing. At the top, the seam of light trembled like a promise. He shoved at it with both hands. Nothing. He slammed his fists against it, his voice cracking into a scream. "Open!" The boards groaned. Dust rained down. The seam widened a fraction, spilling thin air into the choking chamber. John gasped greedily, pressing his mouth to the crack, pulling in the first breath of clean air he'd had in what felt like hours. Then the house roared back. The fire surged, exploding upward, slamming him against the wall. He dropped the chair leg, arms flailing to keep his balance. The seam above seemed to laugh at him open just enough to tease, never enough to free. His skin blistered, his eyes streamed, his voice broke into raw sobs. "Please." And then behind him something shifted. The pounding stopped. The voices fell silent. The sudden absence was worse than the noise. John froze, coughing, eyes darting wildly. "Hello?" The flames flickered lower for a moment, dimming as though starved of oxygen. In the lull, the silence pressed like a hand over his mouth. Then he heard it, a whisper. Not from above, not from behind the walls, but from beneath the floorboards. "There is another way." His chest heaved. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the burn of wood against his palms. "Where? Tell me." The whisper slid through the smoke, slithering. "The floor. Beneath you." He hesitated, terror knotting his stomach. But the flames roared higher again, reminding him, if he stayed, he would die here anyway. He seized the chair leg from the floor, slamming it against the boards at his feet. Once, twice, again. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned. But finally a plank cracked. Fresh air burst upward, cool against his scorched skin. Hope flared. He pounded harder, widening the gap. Through the broken wood, he saw not earth but darkness and empty cavity, hidden beneath the chamber, a crawl space. The fire roared behind him, climbing the walls, devouring the ceiling. Boards collapsed in bursts of sparks. John shoved at the broken planks, tearing them free with raw, bleeding hands. The gap widened enough for his shoulders. He didn't think. He dropped through, landing hard on his stomach in the cavity below. The air was damp, cooler, filled with the smell of mold and soil. For a moment he lay there, gasping, sobbing, cheek pressed to the cold dirt. Above, the fire devoured the chamber. The screams rose again, this time triumphant. Another one claimed. Another voice added. John scrambled forward on his elbows, dragging himself through the narrow crawl space. Cobwebs clung to his face. Damp earth pressed into his skin. The house groaned around him, the fire crackling above, timbers collapsing in bursts. But a headlight, faint, flickering. He clawed toward it with the desperation of the dying. The crawl space tightened around him like a throat. Dirt scraped his arms, roots snagged his hair, cobwebs clung to his lips. Still, John pulled forward, dragging himself inch by inch toward that flicker of light. Every movement tore at his body. His burned palms left smears of blood on the packed soil. His chest scraped raw against the ground. But ahead, the faint glow grew brighter. Behind him, the house screamed. Beams cracked like gunshots. Flames roared, collapsing into the chamber he had escaped. The voices rose with it, a cacophony of shrieks and laughter, echoing down through the crawl space until his skull vibrated. We burn, we burn, we burn together. John clawed faster. The crawl space angled upward, pressing his ribs into stone. His lungs wheezed, every inhale dragging soot from his throat. He pushed with legs that barely obeyed, until suddenly the soil ahead crumbled away. Cold night air hit his face. John gasped, nearly sobbing. He shoved through the opening, shoulders scraping stone, and tumbled out into the open. He lay in grass slick with dew, coughing violently, chest heaving. Cool air rushed into his lungs, burning and soothing all at once. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the night sky. Stars smeared behind the smoke that curled from the house. For a heartbeat, he thought he was safe. Then he looked. The house was ablaze. Flames devoured its old bones, spewing sparks into the New Orleans night. The sagging roof had already collapsed inward, sending showers of embers skyward. Windows shattered one by one, coughing fire into the dark. The sound was deafening, wood snapping, glass imploding, the guttural roar of a house consumed from within. John pushed himself onto trembling knees, staring in horror. God, through the crackle and crash, he swore he still heard them. The voices, the pounding fists, the screams of those still inside. He staggered to his feet, legs buckling beneath him. I have to, but there was nothing left to save. Shadows twisted in the firelight, figures writhing behind the windows. Faces formed in smoke, their mouths open in endless screams. The house wasn't merely burning, it was feeding. John stumbled backward, bile rising. He had escaped the furnace, but the others hadn't. Others, that was the thought that froze him. He had never seen another tenant. The landlord had mentioned none, and yet there had been voices, dozens of them, pounding on his walls, screaming in his ears. Were they alive? Were they ghosts? Or was the house itself a graveyard, filled with every soul it had ever claimed? The heat from the blaze seared his face. He shielded his eyes with a blistered arm, retreating farther into the field. His vision blurred, smoke filling his head. Still the voices carried on the wind. John, his name, soft, rising through the flames. He froze, every muscle taut. The fire roared louder, drowning it out. But for one heartbeat he was sure. The house hadn't let him go. Not truly. By dawn, nothing stood but blackened timbers and smoking ruins. Neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering. Fire trucks arrived too late. No survivors were found, except one. John stood alone in the field, clothes scorched, skin blistered, eyes hollow. He said nothing as the firefighters searched, nothing as they asked how he had escaped, because he knew the truth. He hadn't escaped. Not really. He could still feel the heat in his lungs, hear the voices in his skull. And when he closed his eyes, he saw the flames grinning back. Story 7. The Man in Death. The Omen in the Bowl. Snow fell in heavy silence, blanketing the small Alaskan town until the cabins looked half swallowed by the earth. The world outside was endless white and shadow, the kind of cold that hollowed the lungs with every breath. Inside one of those cabins, little more than a shack of rough-hewn logs and a crooked chimney, sat Elias. The old man leaned heavily on his table, the wood scarred by years of candle wax, knife marks, and ash stains. His beard, long and gray, caught the glow of the oil lamp beside him. The air smelled of smoke and melted wax, tinged with the metallic sharpness of snow seeping in through the warped window panes. For most of his life, Elias had read fortunes for others. Fishermen who feared storms at sea, miners who whispered about accidents in the shafts, wives with anxious eyes who wanted to know if their husbands would come home from the hunt. They all came to him, believing the same thing, that Elias could glimpse into the hidden weave of fate. He had never read for himself, not once. The old superstitions warned against it. To peer into your own path is to invite it to meet you halfway. His grandmother had told him long ago, the road of death does not need a lantern to find its way to your door. But Elias was old now, his joints stiff with the cold, his nights too quiet. He had outlived most of the ones who once came knocking. His cabin stood alone at the edge of the woods, where even the wolves had grown scarce. Tonight, with the snow piling high against his door, loneliness pressed heavier than usual. His heart, stubborn but tired, beat slow in his chest, and curiosity, dark, dangerous curiosity, gnawed at him. So he set the table with the ritual, as he had done 1,000 times for others. The tools were simple: a wooden bowl, plain and cracked, polished, smooth by years of use, a pitcher of well water he had drawn before the freeze set in, a stub of candle to drip wax into the surface, forming shapes that could be read like constellations. He placed the bowl in front of him. For a long moment, he just stared at his reflection rippling in the water, his lined face bending and twisting in the dim lamplight. "You're a fool," he muttered to himself, his voice rough as gravel. "A damned fool." Still, he raised the candle. Hot wax dripped into the bowl. It hardened into pale islands that floated and spun on the surface. Elias leaned closer, eyes narrowing, searching the shifting shapes. At first, it was familiar. He had seen these signs for others. A cross, a wave, the outline of a bird. All fragments of stories, all glimpses of fears and futures. But this time, with every flicker of wax, his breath grew shallower. His reflection in the water seemed to darken, his features swallowed by shadow even though the lamp still burned bright. He shivered. The cabin was warm, but a chill curled up his spine like smoke. Outside, the wind howled across the snowdrifts, rattling the shutters. Elias placed a trembling hand on the bowl. He told himself he would stop, that this had been foolishness, nothing more. But his fingers didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the water, because something was moving there. Not the wax, not the candle's reflection, something else, something black. It slid beneath the surface like a fish in a frozen pond, circling, circling, always just out of focus. The old man's lips parted. A cloud of vapor escaped into the cold cabin air. His heart thumped once, slow and heavy, like a fist against the walls of his chest. The water trembled though his hands were still. Elias leaned closer, breath fogging the bowl, eyes narrowing on the shifting shapes. The wax islands floated apart, twisting and drifting like tiny continents splitting. For years he had read meaning in these forms. The fisherman's net that foretold a catch, the serpent that warned of betrayal, the broken ring that meant loss. Tonight the wax made shapes too, but none he could name. He saw a line that bent, then fractured into two, a hollow circle that refused to close, a crooked blade that wavered before melting back into nothing. Fragments, he whispered, voice rasping. Unfinished, broken. The lamp guttered, casting the cabin in an uneasy glow. He straightened slightly, rubbing his stiff hands together. He could end it here, blow out the flame, tip the water into the snow, pretend the shadows were tricks of age and loneliness. But the black thing beneath the water held him. It drifted lazily under the surface, never quite breaking through. A blot without shape. No omen had ever taken that form. His heart knocked once, hard, in his chest. He reached for the candle again, letting a few more drops fall. The wax hissed as it touched the water, swirling into thin ribbons. They curved together, and for a moment, he thought he saw something familiar. A tree, maybe, or a crossroad. Then the shadow passed beneath it, blotting out the pattern. The tree dissolved. The crossroad vanished. The darkness swallowed everything. Elias's throat tightened. He muttered a prayer his grandmother had taught him as a boy, words meant to keep the dead from wandering into the room of the living. But the sound of his voice trembled, and in the bowl the darkness seemed to shiver in answer. He gripped the table with both hands. His knuckles whitened. It's nothing. Just water. Just shadow. But deep inside, he knew better. He had read signs too long, seen too much to mistake it for coincidence. The water rippled though no breath stirred it. The shadow moved faster, circling the wax fragments, thinning them, pulling them down as though devouring each piece. Elias's reflection warped, his face elongated, eyes sinking deep, mouth stretching too wide. For a flicker of a moment, he did not see himself in the water at all, but something faceless, staring back. He recoiled, chair legs screeching across the wooden floor. His hand shook so badly the candle toppled, wax splattering across the table. The lamp flared. Shadows stretched high up the cabin walls, and still the bowl sat steady, the dark thing inside circling, circling, hungry. Elias clutched at his chest, steadying his breath. Enough. I've gone too far. He reached for the bowl, meaning to dump it, but the closer his hands drew, the colder the air grew. His fingertips numbed as though the water exhaled winter itself. The dark shape slid upward, pressing against the surface now. The water bulged faintly, as if something pressed its face against glass. Elias froze. The shadow lingered there. For the first time, it seemed to hold still. It had weight now, form. And though it had no eyes, he felt it watching him. His chest tightened. His heart stumbled. For the first time in decades, Elias, who had read omens for storms and sickness and death, felt certain of something without needing to name it. This was no omen for another man. This was for him. The candle guttered low, leaving the cabin in near darkness. The snow outside pressed against the windows, muffling the world. Only Elias, the bowl, and the shadow remained. The old man's lips trembled. No, he whispered. Not yet. Not tonight. But the water rippled as though answering, and the shadow only grew darker. The cabin seemed smaller now, its corners swallowed by the lamplight's trembling glow. Elias sat rigid at the table, his eyes fixed on the bowl before him. The water no longer looked like water, it was black glass, a mirror that refused to return his face. The shadow had stopped circling. It pressed closer to the surface, as though waiting. Elias's hand twitched above it, uncertain. His instincts, honed over years of reading for strangers, whispered the meaning. When a sign waits, it waits for recognition. The reader must name it, but he could not. There was no name for a darkness that erased all symbols, that devoured wax as though swallowing time itself. "No," he muttered, his voice cracked. "It's nothing more than exhaustion. Smoke in the air, eyes failing me." The cabin groaned as though disagreeing. Outside, the wind drove snow against the shutters with sharp cracks, each one like a knuckle rapping the door. Elias flinched at every strike. He dragged a hand across his face, skin rough and cold. "I'll prove it," he said aloud, as though the sound could banish fear. "I'll do another, a second reading. This one, it was flawed." He refilled the pitcher, pouring fresh water into the bowl, watching as the dark liquid lapped the edges. His hands trembled so badly the surface quaked, scattering the last of the wax fragments. For a moment, relief, clear water again. But the instant he lifted the candle, letting wax drip into the bowl, the darkness returned. It rose beneath the surface without hesitation, erasing the pale flecks the moment they touched the water. The wax did not even have time to cool. Elias recoiled as though scalded. His chair scraped backward, rattling against the plank floor. No, impossible. He grabbed the bowl with both hands, ready to hurl it against the wall, yet stopped. The water was freezing against his palms. His breath caught. It was colder than any winter night, colder than ice drawn from the river. The shock bit deep into his bones, but still he couldn't let go. His hands locked around the bowl as if it clung back. He stared into it, teeth clenched, until the blackness inside began to shift again. At first it was only suggestion, a bend in the shadow, a curve, a hollow. Then slowly, form, a figure, not sharp, not whole, but enough. Shoulders, a head bowed forward, limbs indistinct, melting into smoke, and though no features showed, Elias felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The longer he stared, the stronger it grew, until the air itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. "Not real," he rasped. "Not real," but the figure remained. It leaned closer. Elias's breath came fast, ragged. His heart thudded hard, painfully, in his chest. He pressed a hand to it, as if to keep it inside. His grandmother's words came back, harsh and unbidden. "To peer into your own path is to invite it to meet you halfway." He had not believed her then. He did now. The bowl quivered in his hands. Ripples spread outward as though something pressed against the underside, trying to break free. Elias stumbled, setting it back on the table with a clatter, water spilling across the boards. The shadow stretched wider, swelling to fill the bowl, pressing against the rim as though it would overflow. Elias stumbled back, clutching at the wall, eyes wide. His breath smoked in the frigid air. "It's nothing," he croaked. "A trick of the mind. I'm tired, old, sick, but his body betrayed him. His chest burned, muscles seizing. Each breath was shorter than the last, and still the figure leaned closer in the water, faceless, patient, waiting for him to accept. He shut his eyes. If I don't look, it isn't real. But in the dark behind his eyelids, the shadow remained. And now, it whispered, a sound low and steady, threading into his ears. Not words, not yet, but the cadence of speech. Elias shook his head violently, covering his ears. "No, you don't speak." But the whisper grew clearer, forming into syllables that carried weight heavier than any he had heard before. Soon, the word dropped into him like a stone into a well, sinking deep, sending ripples through marrow and memory alike. Elias gasped, his eyes snapping open. The bowl was black, the figure inside closer than ever, and for the first time, he understood the truth. This was not an omen. It was a promise. The lamp guttered low, flame bending as though the very air recoiled from the bowl. Elias sat trembling, both hands gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white, his breathing shallow. The figure inside the water swelled, its shape pressing wider, taller, filling every corner of the bowl. until no surface remained untouched by its presence. His chest tightened. A sharp bolt of pain shot through him, first faint, then brutal, radiating down his left arm. He gasped, clutching his ribs with one hand. His pulse stuttered, uneven. "No," he wheezed. "Not yet. Not like this." The shadow leaned closer still, its head bowing as if peering through the thin membrane of water. The ripples around it slowed until the liquid lay almost perfectly still, glass-like. Elias could not look away. His eyes burned, but still he stared, pleading silently with a thing that offered no mercy. He forced himself upright, staggering back from the table. His chair toppled with a crash. "It's nothing," he rasped. "A trick. My mind, my age." But the air inside the cabin grew colder. Frost bloomed along the glass of the window, veins of ice crawling inward though the fire still smoldered in the stove. His breath spilled white clouds, and in the bowl the shadow began to rise. The surface bulged, trembling, as if the figure were pressing against it from below. Elias's stomach lurched. He grabbed the bowl, meaning to hurl it across the room, but the moment his fingers touched the wood, another pain speared his chest. He collapsed forward, elbows hitting the table, clutching his shirt as his heart hammered wildly. The bowl sloshed but did not spill. The shadow inside only grew darker. He staggered to his feet, dragging himself toward the door. His boots scraped against the floorboards, each step a desperate struggle. "I won't," he groaned. "I won't be in here, not alone, not watched." But when he fumbled with the latch, his vision blurred. His hand slipped, too weak to turn the iron. He collapsed against the doorframe, gasping. Behind him, the whisper returned, curling through the cabin like smoke. Soon, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, coughing raggedly, tears streaking through the soot on his face. His pulse thundered in his ears, loud enough to drown the howl of the storm outside. "No," he choked again. "Not yet." But even as he spoke, the bowl rattled violently on the table, as though struck from within. The water rippled outward, and for a split second Elias swore he saw it, his own reflection staring back, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes blackened into pits. The whisper deepened, spreading into two words now, reverberating in the marrow of his bones. "For you." Elias's chest seized. His hand clawed weakly at the floorboards, nails scraping grooves into the wood. His vision swam with black spots, each one swelling until the room flickered in and out of existence. The bowl trembled again. This time, a thin crack split the wood, and water leaked across the table like spilled ink. But the shadow did not fade. It stretched with the spill, smearing into the very grain of the boards. The figure was no longer contained. It filled the cabin. Elias pressed himself against the door, his face contorted with terror. "No, no." His words disintegrated into a broken wheeze. The shadow loomed taller, blotting out the weak glow of the lamp. The cabin was dark now, darker than any Alaskan night, darker than the grave. He clutched his chest, gasping, as if he might hold his heart inside by sheer will. His body trembled, betrayed him, bent him forward into the dust, and still he fought. He clawed at the latch again, blood pounding in his ears, vision narrowing to a single tunnel. But the voice whispered once more, final this time, undeniable. "It is already here." Elias collapsed to his knees, one hand clamped tight over his chest. The pain came in waves, searing, crushing, as though a giant hand had closed around his ribcage and was squeezing the life out of him. His breaths grew shallow, jagged. Each inhale felt like fire, each exhale weaker than the last. The bowl rattled on the table again. The crack widened, water spilling in a thin stream across the scarred wood, dripping to the floor in dark streaks. The shadow inside spread with it, smearing like spilled ink, seeping into the cracks of the cabin itself. Elias lifted his head, tears stinging his eyes. His voice broke into a hoarse whisper. "No, I won't. I'm not ready." The figure gave no reply. It didn't need to. Its presence filled the cabin, pressing into every corner, blotting out the glow of the lamp. The shadows had weight now, the room closing tighter with each heartbeat. He tried to crawl, dragging himself toward the door, his fingertips leaving smears of blood on the wood. His other hand clawed blindly at the floor, searching for anything to hold, anything to fight against the gravity that pulled him downward. His heart thundered, skipped, then lurched painfully in his chest. The whisper came again, closer, colder. Soon? No. Now. Elias shuddered. His body seized. He collapsed onto his side, mouth opening in a silent cry. Through the blur of his failing vision, he saw the bowl tilt. It slid across the table, struck the edge, and tipped. Water poured out in a black sheet, carrying the last fragments of wax with it. The bowl hit the floor with a dull crack and rolled once, coming to rest near his outstretched hand. The shadow it had contained no longer needed a vessel. It stretched tall above him, faceless, patient, infinite. Elias's breaths came shorter now. His fingers twitched against the floor, trying to pull himself one last inch closer to the door. But his body would not obey. In that final moment, clarity struck. This was no mistake, no trick of the eyes, no superstition. He had summoned his own death the moment he dared to read for himself. He had lit the candle, poured the water, and stared into the bowl as though it were a mirror. And what else could a mirror of fate show to a man at the end of his road but this? His lips trembled around his last words. I read my death. The words were hardly sound, barely breath. Then his chest seized one final time. The world tilted, narrowed, and went utterly black. The cabin stood silent. The oil lamp guttered and died, leaving the room lit only by the faint glow of moonlight seeping through frost-coated glass. The wooden bowl lay cracked on the floor, its water gone, its shadow dispersed. The only movement came from Elias's still body, as it cooled slowly on the floorboards. Outside, the storm raged across the Alaskan night. Snow drifted high against the door, covering the last trace of sound. And within the cabin, silence reigned deep, heavy, and complete. And so, dear listener, the hour runs out. The signal fades. 7 stories, 7 doors that will not close once opened. A shepherd who still walks with the storm. A memory that takes the shape of a father. A house with wives beneath its floor. A blind man who feeds the alley with eyes. A child who points to what her mother cannot see. A furnace room that speaks in screams. And an old man who read his own death. Perhaps you recognize something in them. A place you've passed at night. A word your child once whispered. A dream you half remembered when you woke. The truth is, these things are never far. They linger in the quiet places, the forgotten corners, waiting for someone like you to notice. So when you turn off this broadcast and the room grows silent, listen closely. If you hear the pipes groan, the walls sigh, or a voice whisper your name, it might not be the radio at all. This has been your Midnight Companion. Until next time, keep the lights low and your ears open.